morning, councillors, officers and members of the public. Welcome to this virtual meeting of the Northern Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Craig Brown, your chairman for today's meeting. I'll just like to start by explaining some ground rules for those taking part in the meeting. Firstly, please can you keep your camera and microphone switched off until I invite you to speak. This is to ensure that only one voice at a time can be heard, talking without interruption, and also this helps to avoid feedback and background noise as well as saving on bandwidth. For members of the committee wishing to speak during a debate or raise a procedural point, please indicate your wish to do so by using the chat facility, which can be accessed via the information bar near the centre of your display. This also helps me to keep a check on who asked to speak first, and I can go to everybody in order. So present at today's meeting are members of the Northern Planning Committee, and I intend to now just call them each by name one by one and ask them to turn on the camera and microphone to introduce themselves and to confirm that they can hear the proceedings. Before I do that, could I just ask Mr. Roger Small to turn off his camera, please? So I'll now move on to members present, starting with good morning to Councillor Liz Braithwaite.
Yeah, good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Good morning, Councillor Tony Dean.
Morning. Can you see me?
We can see you and hear you indeed. Thank you. Councillor Paul Findlow. Good morning.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Ailish Harewood.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. Councillor Sally Holland.
Yes, good morning, Chair. I can see and hear you.
Good morning. Councillor Ian McFarlane.
Yes, good morning, Chair and everybody. Loud and clear, thank you.
Good morning, thank you. And Councillor Nick Mannion.
Good morning, Chair and everybody. Yes, I can hear and see you.
And Councillor Brendan Murphy has sent apologies for the morning session, but will be joining us this afternoon. So Councillor James Nicholas.
Good morning, I can see and hear, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Brian Puddicombe.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning. And finally, good morning to Councillor Leslie Smetham.
Good morning.
Thank you. So also present at the meeting are the following officers who are here to advise the committee regarding the applications on the agenda. So they are Sarah Baxter, Democratic Services Officer, Adrian Crowther from the Major Applications Team Leader, Rachel Hamilton, Conservation Officer, Paul Hurdus, Highways Development Manager, Paul Wakefield, Planning Team Leader, and Mandy Withington, Planning Solicitor. So I'll now explain how the committee will operate. The Planning Officer will introduce the application, show slides, photos and plans relating to the site. I will then invite any registered public speakers to address the committee and ask them to turn on their camera and microphone and state their name and the name of any group that they are representing. I will inform them how much time they have to speak and that they must finish within the speaking time, or the microphones may be muted to enable the meeting to continue. If anything the speaker has said was unclear, I will allow members of the committee to ask questions of clarification. Once they've spoken, the public speakers should turn off their camera and microphone, but are more than welcome to remain in the meeting and listen to the debate and the decision which follow. The Planning Officer will respond to any issues raised by the public speaker, and then members of the committee will be able to ask the Planning Officer questions before moving to debate the application. I remind members to indicate again in the chat function, please, if they wish to speak during the debate. When the debate moves to a close, I will check with the officers whether they have any final advice or points of clarification, and that the terms of the resolution which have been moved and seconded are clear to all. I'll then invite each member of the committee in alphabetical order to turn on their camera and microphone to confirm their support for the resolution, or otherwise by stating for, against or not voting. And the result of the vote will then be reported to the meeting. As a reminder, members of the committee can only participate in and vote on the application if they can hear and be heard throughout. If a member loses their connection and is able to alert us to this fact, the meeting may be able to adjourn for a short period to allow them to reconnect. But if they're unable to reconnect within a short time, the meeting will be continued without them and they will be unable to participate in or vote on that particular application. If the live stream of the meeting fails, the meeting will be adjourned again for a reasonable length of time to try and restore the connection. But if it's not possible to do this, the meeting will be postponed to a new date. And please note that this meeting is being recorded and streamed live to the public, and also that there will be a fire alarm test at 11 AM. So we now move on to the agenda, and item 1 is apologies for absence. Mrs. Baxter, are there any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman, just Councillor Brendan Murphy's apologies for the morning session.
Thank you very much. So item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest from members of the committee? Please can members indicate using the chat facility, and then I will invite them to give a verbal report on their declaration. Thank you. So I can see Councillor Ian McFarlane, please. Councillor McFarlane, you're on mute.
Apologies. I got a note from Councillor Tony Fox, I think others may have done as well, which is concerning the item number 7 on the park and ride facility. Councillor Fox gave some comments and information on that particular application. I received it yesterday. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McFarlane. Any further items of declaration? Councillor Mannion, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The same item, regarding the park and ride facility application 20/2211M. I'm the council portfolio holder for assets, and the application is made in the name of Engine of the North, which is part of Chester East Council. I've had no involvement in this application or had any discussions with any officers with regard to it. So I just might like to make that declaration in the interest of openness. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mannion. Are there declarations? Councillor Dean, please.
Yes, Chairman. Firstly, I've not had any information from Councillor Tony Fox, and I'm a little bit perturbed until I find out what it was all about, that the portfolio holder should be writing to certain members of the committee and not others, but we'll leave that for another day. My declaration of interest is probably not of any importance, but I'm a Vodafone user, and I believe Vodafone is one of the applicants.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. And Councillor Nicholas, please.
Yeah, it was just to say it's the same as well. In the interest of openness and transparency, I also received an email from Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Councillor Nicholas. Councillor Findlow, please.
Sorry, it looks as though some members, independent members so far, have received this said elusive communication, and others, including myself to the best of my knowledge, and Councillor Dean, have not. We seem to be at a disadvantage, Chairman. I'm not quite sure how you proceed. Incidentally, if we're going to confess to being Vodafone users, I think my wife is.
Thank you for that, Councillor Findlow. I'm not aware of the email that's being referred to. I don't know whether I've been sent it overnight or not, but I haven't checked my emails this morning to know whether I have. So I guess I'll make that declaration just in case. And Councillor Smetham, please.
Thank you. Yes, I'm a Vodafone user and I haven't received any messages from Tony Fox. I've just checked my email. It's not there at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Holland, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just also to mention that I have not received any correspondence from the portfolio holder either. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, I had my hand raised. Could you see it?
Apologies, Councillor Harewood. Yes, I can. I don't know whether everybody else is able to see a guest speaker, Mr. Roger Small, but on my screen at least, he's taking up the entirety of the screen. His camera appears to have frozen, and I'm concerned that this may affect the presentation when we come to address the application. So I've just asked IT if they can try and resolve that issue. But please go ahead, Councillor Harewood.
No, I would like to mention application number 820/3347M, the installation of a stop tower. I had been in discussion with it when I was on the planning with the town council, but I'm not now, and I had not made any decision at all. I have no other interest in it at all. So I just want to declare that I was first in discussion with this matter, but have no interest in it at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chairman, I can just interrupt. If I can, what I'll do is I will remove Mr. Small from the meeting, and then when he rejoins, hopefully his camera will not be frozen and we won't be able to see it.
Thank you very much. That's now happened. And Councillor Holland, your comment in the chat is noted. I think we've addressed that through the declarations we've had so far, but a record can be kept with the minutes of those members who have received correspondence. Thank you. Councillor Harewood, your hand is still up. I'm assuming that's a legacy hand.
I beg your pardon, what did you say?
I noted, Councillor Harewood, that your hand is still raised.
I'm so sorry. Sorry.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move on to item 3 of the agenda, which is the minutes of the previous meeting, which took place on the 2nd of December last year. I will propose them as chair. Could I invite Councillor Dean as Vice Chairman to second that proposal, please?
Sorry, can I just interrupt, Chairman? I've got a slight correction to the minutes. On page 6 of the agenda pack, minute 51, application 20/0113M. In the minute, it says that the agent for the applicant who spoke was Nick Smith. That's incorrect. It was actually Alison Freeman. So apologies for that, and that needs to be noted.
Thank you, Mrs. Beck. We will arrange for that to be amended. So with that minor amendment, Councillor Dean. Sorry.
Happy to second with that minor amendment, which I'd obviously spotted, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Smetham, please.
Thank you. Yes, it's a very small point, but I wanted to clarify my declaration in the meeting on 20/0133M. This was a previous ward that I represented, Macclesfield Forest, and I just wanted to make it clear that I had not ever had any dealings with this particular area. So it just says it appears that it's in my current ward, which it is not, but it was in a previous ward of Macclesfield Forest. Would the officer like me to send clear wording for that to add, or is that?
You can do, Councillor Smith, but I think I understand what you're saying, so I'll record that in the minutes as well. Apologies for those minor errors. Thank you.
No, that's probably the way I said it, but thank you, Sarah.
I think if we look at the penultimate paragraph on page 5, it is, of the agenda, we can just insert the word previous before the word ward, and that will address that one. But thank you, Councillor Smith.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you.
So moving on, the minutes as slightly amended have been proposed and seconded as a correct record. So can I now invite briefly each member of the committee to confirm their support or otherwise by stating for, against, or not voting if they were either not present or were not present for each and every item. So when members do so, please can they turn on the camera and microphone to identify themselves. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Dean.
4, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Finlow.
4, but I wasn't there for one item, was I?
Thank you. Councillor Harewood.
4.
Councillor Holland.
Yes, 4, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McFarlane.
4, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Mannion.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Nicholas.
4.
Councillor Puddicombe.
Not voting, Chair, as I wasn't present for the latter part of the meeting.
Thank you. And Councillor Smetham, please.
4.
Thank you. And myself, Councillor Brown, also 4. So those minutes are clearly carried. Thank you. Members, item 4 is public speaking time, and I will invite members and members of the public who have pre-registered to speak on the application that is relevant to that which they have registered for when we move to that part of the agenda. So we now move to item 5, which is our first application proper.
Can I ask something, please, first?
Please do, Councillor Finlay.
I was sent in the post 2 copies of the plans. Now, I've not compared and contrasted them both. Is this just unique to me? Are the 2 copies identical or different?
Every member of the committee has been sent a second set of the plans. It was identified at the chair's briefing at the end of last week that there had been a printing error and that some of the plans on the original set had not printed or were able to be displayed properly. So we had some applications where bits of the plans had been cut off. So the second set of papers that you've received are the correct ones and the ones you should refer to.
Thank you for clarifying.
No problem. Thank you. So I'll now move to our first application, item 5, which is application 20/4483M, which is for the demolition of existing 2 detached properties and erection of a 63-bedroom care home with associated landscaping, car parking and access at numbers 51 and 53 Hanforth Road, Wilmsley, for J. Parr of New Care Projects LLP. And I'd now like to invite our planning officer, Mr. Paul Wakefield, to present this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, everybody. There is just an update to provide since the agenda was published, because there were just a couple of outstanding matters. First of all, on trees, we have received comments from our tree officer, who has noted the similarities of the current proposal to the previous scheme and raises no objections subject to a condition. Now, condition 15, which is listed on page 25, currently refers to details to be submitted, but in light of the comments from the tree officer and having looked at the details that we do have, he recommends that that condition is amended to just require the development to be carried out in accordance with the submitted tree details. And then secondly, environmental health, also raised no objection subject to a number of conditions which are already recommended and covered within the conditions listed on page 25 as appropriate. Then the applicant has also provided a small amount of additional information. He has said that they accept that there is a current national reduction in care home occupancy levels, but this is simply as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has resulted in high mortality rates for residents when an outbreak situation has occurred in their home. With admissions to care homes reduced as potential new residents are staying at home. Once the vaccine is rolled out and the virus abates, the requirement for additional care home bedrooms will again be significant. And the applicant goes on to state that new care homes, the applicant have not seen any significant reductions in demand for their homes, due to them providing additional beds for the NHS to support them to discharge patients from hospital to a safe environment, and also the high levels of care and precautions taken in the new care They continue. Overall, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused a short-term shift in the need for residential care for older people, in part due to the reluctance of families placing a loved one within a care home in the knowledge that lockdowns may prevent them from having face-to-face visits. Care homes have been adversely affected and often unfairly portrayed by the press, given that they cater for the frailest 3% of elderly people in the country and those most susceptible to respiratory issues caused by COVID-19. And they also add, just to provide a bit of additional background in terms of the reasoning for the change to the approved scheme. They've confirmed that following a review of the approved scheme, it was identified that the additional communal areas on each of the floors was unnecessary, given that further day space was already available elsewhere within the building. Hence the change to each of these areas to an additional bedroom on each floor. The applicant is looking to commence on site before the end of January, and the applicant's agent has confirmed that no further changes are planned. But the key point to make is that it's not part of a bigger plan to incrementally increase the size of the care home. This does look like this is it, and no further changes are anticipated. I'll just share my screen now for the presentation. Sorry, just let me change that over. Hopefully we can see the location plan.
Yes, we can see that, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a site that members will no doubt remember, and we have fortunately had the benefit of a site visit before, so that helps as well, given the current circumstances. So it's 51 to 53 Hanforth Road, two detached residential dwellings set in fairly substantial grounds, area of open space to the rear of the properties, with a public footpath that runs along that top boundary there, and then a belt of landscaping until we get to the next properties on Welland Road. The immediately adjoining neighbour at number 49, as you can see there. And just to put that in wider context, as you can see, it's quite a good degree of vegetation within the site and surrounding the site as well. Open space to the rear. So a few photographs of the application site. Two properties when viewed from Hanforth Road, 51 on the left and 53 on the right. Then looking, this is a view from the rear garden of number 49, looking at number 51 and then 53 beyond. As you can see, and you probably noticed from the previous photograph that the levels sort of slope down from 49 to 51 to 53, which it signifies the topography of the land that members may recall. And then again, just looking in the rear garden of number 51 towards number 49, so that's the neighbour at number 49. And you can just see how the land levels have risen up at the back of the property as well. Oh, sorry. Then again, just as a reminder that members may recall, a view from the rear garden of number 51, looking back at the existing dwelling, quite a substantial garden, plenty of vegetation within it. And then again, this is the boundary to the north of number 53, which borders the public footpath, which I think we walked along at the time of the site visit, probably some 12 months ago or maybe more now. Okay, so as members will be aware, as is set out in the report, that the previous scheme was allowed on appeal last year, and this was the approved layout. The proposed change as part of the current proposal primarily relates to the provision of 3 additional bedrooms, which occupies this location here. Excuse me. So this at the moment the approved scheme has this communal lounge and what's proposed with a terrace above, and what's proposed is an additional bedroom within this location on each floor. But otherwise, the footprint remains very similar, as we can see here. Excuse me. I hope my voice is going to last. Excuse me. So this is the approved layout plan. The parking and the general arrangement within the site remains as existing. As previously approved. And then, sorry. Sorry, Chairman. Then, so the proposed and approved front elevations. Can be seen on this slide. Proposed at the top, approved at the bottom. Very similar in appearance. And then again, this is the elevation that faces the footpath, and it's this central bit. You can see where the key difference is, where the bedrooms are provided. Oh, sorry. And then again at the rear, proposed again at the top and the approved at the bottom. Again, just showing those similarities between the two developments. The changes are very limited in their nature, as you can see. And then finally, the last elevation. Again, you can see the comparison between the two. Proposed at the top, approved at the bottom. It's very similar to that previously approved. And that's everything, Chairman. Apologies for the coughing, but for the reasons set out in the report, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wakefield. So I will now move on to public speakers, and we have 2 speakers registered for this item. So I'd now like to call the first of those, Councillor Birkhill, who is the ward councillor, to address the committee. So Councillor Birkhill, please turn on your camera and microphone, and you have 5 minutes. Please speak whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good morning, members. It's a matter of deep regret and concern that the planning inspectors failed to either take notice of facts or they seem to ignore them. The Eastern Cheshire CCG, they objected to this application, and they objected to it long before the outbreak of COVID. Their objections were to the need for this care home in this area, where there are already 21 homes competing for residents to fill them. The only way this can be done is to bring in the elderly to Cheshire East from other areas outside our boundaries, and which has already happened at Eden Mansions Care Home, and causing more pressure on local health provision. Policy SC4, which is outlined on page 18, states that such developments for the elderly and those who require specialist accommodation will be supported where there is a proven need. And of course, the converse of that is that they will not support them if there is no proven need. There's no proven need here for the development, but there is a proven need to protect our NHS services. Of the 656 care home vacancies in Cheshire East, more than a third of them, 226, are in this area around Wilmslow. And we have policies which protect us from overdevelopment of care homes, which seem to be not being used. The £29,000 mitigation towards local health care provision, of course, is a drop in the ocean of the actual added costs, and will impact upon medical services for all residents in the area. One planning inspector has overridden the considered opinion of members of this committee. And now we are being faced with maybe, although they don't say so, but maybe the gradual increase of the numbers of rooms on this site to perhaps what was originally planned. And the application, if approved, will be referred to the Secretary of State. And it's a great pity that he did not call in the 60-bedroom application for his determination last August after the original refusal. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Burkill. Are there any questions from members of the committee, please? Please indicate using the chat function if you wish to ask a question. I did see a comment from Councillor Smetham a little while ago. Did this relate to this application or something different?
To the declaration. I think it's to the minutes, Chair.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to here.
It may be a previous comment you made in the chat. Apologies, my mistake, Councillor Smetham.
Thank you.
Councillor Findlay, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I was interested in this figure of 21 competing homes. I don't know what area the 21 come from, how widely that is drawn. Perhaps we could be advised, because it seems a very large figure, 21.
Councillor Burkill, would you care to respond to that?
Well, I'm just taking the figures from the actual report, Chairman. Those 21 homes, I presume, are in this particular area, in the northern area of our community.
Perhaps it would be better to address the officers.
Yes.
What area is covered by the 21, Chairman? Thank you. We'll
pick that up in questions back to officers. Thank you, Councillor Findler. Councillor Smetham, please.
Thank you. I think I heard Councillor Burkill say that there are policies to protect us from care homes. Was that correct? And does perhaps this is a question for the, might be a question for the officers as to what the policies are that protect us from care homes. Thank you.
Councillor Burkill, please.
No, yes, Chair. Sorry, that I'm just picked out. I mean, there's an obvious one. You see there that policy SC4, which is it is a protection for us. It's not only an encouragement for people to bring forward care homes when they are needed, certainly, but it's also a protection for us from when they're not.
Thank you, Councillor Burkill. Any further questions, please, members? Okay, in that case, no further questions. So thank you, Councillor Burkill. Can I now ask you to turn off your camera and microphone?
Certainly.
But please do feel free to remain in the meeting.
I will do so. Thank you. Thanks, Chairman.
Right. So I'll now ask the next speaker who is registered, and I'd like to call Glyn Traynor, who is an objector, to address the committee. So, Mr. Traynor, please could you now turn on your camera and microphone and prepare to address the meeting. Mr. Traynor, you have 3 minutes. Please begin whenever you're ready.
Hello, yes, I'm speaking on behalf of the residents and as the immediate neighbour to the site. This new application for 63 beds must be scrutinised in light of the new and significant data from the Director of Adult Social Care, questioning need for more residential care in this locality. The report states that there are 650 plus vacant beds in Cheshire and 226 plus vacant beds in Wilmslow. There are also 3 abandoned ex-nursing homes that sit within a 2-mile radius of this site. The recommended refusal by CEC on the issue of need is supported by current policy, which heavily leans towards the extra care housing, keeping the elderly at home for as long as possible and not residential care. There is therefore no justification for the extra 3 beds. The 25 car parking spaces that include 8 tandem were regarded by CEC as inadequate for the approved 60-bed scheme. This new application for 3 extra bedrooms will bring more visitor cars to the site and overstretch the parking, which will inevitably lead to off-road parking. This application has also increased the part-time staff by 9 and now has a huge 79 staff total. It has been well documented that this site has a very poor public transport network, so this increase in staff can only worsen the already inadequate parking. I am extremely concerned that the CEC conditions won't be met or upheld. This commercial venture has not demonstrated it can be self-sufficient without having to use Hamforth Road as parking overspill for the construction phase and the ongoing day-to-day operation once opened. Any request to increase the operational capacity of the business should be refused. There has already been roadside parking outside the site during the preliminary works in which several residents have complained to the council. The topography and location of this site make roadside parking extremely dangerous on this stretch of Hamforth Road. This cannot be ignored. Therefore, I urge the committee to stand firm and refuse the increase in capacity and uphold the 15 specified conditions for the approved plan only. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Traynor. Members of the committee, are there any questions, please, for Mr. Traynor? I've got Councillor Mannion, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Traynor. The local bus service, which I believe is the 130, has been subject to quite a lot of changes during the life of the planning applications on this site. What is the current service provided? Is it 7 days a week, and does it extend into the evening, or is it just basically an office hours Monday to Friday service these days?
It's changed considerably, and I believe now at the current point there is no weekend service at all.
Thank you.
What in the evenings?
It seems to, from the data that I've seen, it seems to be up in arms of what they're actually providing at this moment in time. Could possibly be due to COVID at this moment in time, but there's no actual. I think there's another company that's looking at taking over this operation, this side of the road. But as current, it's a skeleton run bus service.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Mannion is portfolio holder for transport. I can clarify that there is no evening service. Councillor Holland, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I had a similar question about buses, really, and the network. I'm not obviously from that area, so have little understanding of the bus network. But I have concerns regarding accessibility on buses and public transport, because I recall one gentleman who, this is many years ago, who was unable to have his mother cared for in a local care home, and he had to. He was autistic. Yes, I am getting to the point. He was autistic and had to cycle in all weathers from Congleton to Knutsford, for example. And I'm concerned that that scenario may happen again. Do you have an impression that that could happen? People could be put into this home from outside the area and then have limited transport opportunities to get to see their relatives. Thank you, Mr. Traynor. I was getting to my question. Apologies, Chair.
Yes, I'd agree with that. Yes.
Thank you. Are there any further questions, members? I'm not seeing anybody indicating. In that case, Mr. Traynor, thank you. Please could you now turn off your camera and microphone, but do remain in the meeting. So I would like to go back to our planning officer, Mr. Wakefield, just to ask if there are any points that were raised during the public speaking that he would like to respond to, or indeed to the couple of questions asked by members to the public speaker that actually I think we'll be seeking clarification from you on. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, probably just a couple of things. I think it is just important to note that, or to stress again that there is the principle of the development has already been approved. So a 60-bed care home has been approved on this site, and as I sort of as is set out in the report and alluded to in the presentation, that the key difference is just this provision, this provision of 3 additional bedrooms with the current proposal compared to that which has already been approved and is likely to be commenced before the end of this month on site. So issues of access to public transport have already been accepted by the inspector. Similarly, in terms of car parking, I think Mr. Hurdis could probably add a few more words on this, but again, the level of parking provision has already been accepted at appeal. Even on the appeal that was previously dismissed, it had a lower rate of parking, and even that was accepted as well at the same time. So the level of parking, whilst it does fall below our standards, has been justified through reference to other similar facilities within the borough. Just in terms of the comments from Councillor Burkill, and I think 21 care homes was queried by Councillor Finlow. I'm not sure where that figure's come from. I can't see it in the report unless I've just missed it, but I'm not. I don't know what that reference relates to, unfortunately, so I can't really add anything to that. And then in terms of which policies protect us from care homes, yeah, I'm not sure we need protecting necessarily from care homes, but policy SC4, which is summarised on the 3rd paragraph down on page 18, is probably the most relevant policy that members should be aware of. But as I say, I think the key point that I just want to get across is that we do have this principle for a 60-bed care home, and it's what greater impact these additional 3 bedrooms will have that members need to focus their consideration on today. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wakefield. Before I go back to members for questions, I would like to invite Mr. Hurdis to just come in and briefly address the parking issue that was raised.
Well, thank you, Chair. Hopefully you can hear me. Good morning, members. I just thought it was useful just to go through some of the history in relation to this site, particularly into parking, as that was raised by one of the speakers. The original application for 65 units had 24 spaces, so that was 65 beds for 24. Now it's 25 spaces for 63 units, so actually it's quite slightly better provision. We didn't actually object to that back in 2019. We looked at it very carefully. The applicant provided quite a bit of evidence in relation to similar care homes and where they operated with similar staff ratios. So we looked at that evidence very carefully, and we concluded that we couldn't object on high-risk safety grounds as a result of potentially insufficient parking. That went to appeal in October 2019, and the inspector agreed with us in essence and didn't object to the application on highways. I know they did dismiss the application, but they didn't object or say there was any material harm in relation to highways. Then there was a second application, I think it was in last year, beginning of last year, and that was for 60 units. It was slightly less, 65 down to 60 units, and that was 25 spaces, so slightly better ratio. Again, we didn't object because of what we said previously and what the previous inspector had said. Again, that went to appeal, and the inspector in essence had a fresh look at the highway issues there in relation to the parking provision, and did concur with the previous inspector. So these are very important material considerations. And then we've got the current application on the table, slight increase in number of units from 60 to 63. The number of bedrooms is, the number of spaces is 24. So very similar to what it was before. Hence, we wouldn't object on that small incremental increase from the previous application, because the application back in 2019 was for a slightly higher number of units and slightly lower number of spaces. So we've looked at it very carefully. We've looked at the evidence that's been supplied by the applicant in relation to surveys that have been undertaken at similar facilities, and we couldn't actually object to the application. So we are satisfied that it does contain enough car parking for its function. If I may, Chair, I've just got some information on the bus services down Hanforth Road.
Thank you.
Yeah, I saw it yesterday. I saw the bus yesterday, actually. I was out at Hanforth, had a look at this application. I looked at an application we're going to discuss later in the day. So I saw the bus, the 130, operated by D&G. It used to be operated by Arriva. I'm sure most members used to be quite a long route from Macclesfield up to Manchester there, Piccadilly, but that wasn't found to be commercially viable. So it was, I think originally Arriva did terminate it in the suburbs of South Manchester at Disbury. That still wasn't acceptable, so they did withdraw the route. Then Cheshire East Council came along and subsidised D&G to provide a service. So just looking at the timetable here, this is from October 2020. And as I think Chair and other members have made the point, things are in a complete state of flux in public transport at the moment. Obviously, demand is 20–30% of pre-COVID, so it's very difficult to make judgments at this moment in time. But there is a Monday to Friday service, roughly hourly. So that starts at 8 in the morning, finishes about 6:30 in the evening. And there is a Saturday service, but it's only 2 hourly. Just checking the timetable here, 2 hourly. And that runs from Handforth up at the paddock in the main town, in the village, down to Macclesfield. So that is roughly 2 hourly on Saturdays during the day, but there's no Sunday service. So that actually isn't too bad for that type of route, I have to say, and the likely demand from this facility. So there is a bus service there. It may be slightly different to what the inspector considered back in 2019, but if we were considering the whole application today and that particular service there, we would be satisfied from a connectivity perspective. It would be acceptable given the likely use and the other opportunities that there are to get to the site sustainably. So that's just a bit of an overview there, Chair. Hopefully that's helpful for yourself and members of the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hurdis, for that very comprehensive explanation. So I'll now move to questions from members. I can see so far 3 members indicating. So I'll start with Councillor Holland, then Councillor Harewood, Councillor Findlow, and I can see also Councillor Dean. So Councillor Holland, please.
Sorry, Chair, I hadn't got my hand up to speak. I just made a comment that on page 14, the NHS Cheshire Clinic and Commission Group mentioned about the 21 care homes in the area. So it was said to verbalise it. So that's what I'm doing. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that, Councillor Holland. Councillor Harewood, please.
Thank you, Chair. To come back to page 18, I can't see the justification for a proven need and 656 vacancies. Can I ask the question, is this a need that you're seeing for the future? Because it can't be seen now. And is it based on age and care needs? Where is this proven need based? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harewood. Councillor Findlow, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Holland has provided part of the information I was going to quote, 21 care homes on page 14. The other figures quoted and cited by Councillor Burkle are on page 18, Head of Adult Services Objection, 656 vacancies, 226 of which are in Winslow and surrounding areas. I'm not sure how far surrounding areas extend, but that doesn't really matter. My question, Chairman, is really one on page 19 about the 3 additional bedrooms, which should be addressed to the applicant, but we have no applicant's representative present. Is that correct?
That is correct, Councillor Findlow.
Well, in that case, can I ask the question anyway? It refers in the 3rd paragraph from the bottom on page 19 to the principal misspelt difference is that 3 additional bedrooms would be located where there were previously a lounge area on the ground floor and roof terraces at the 1st and 2nd floor. So I would have asked why we are depriving these residents of that facility. I think they're very important for their wider health to have such facilities as lounges. So I suppose we can't really answer that question, but I make the point nonetheless.
We will invite the officer to attempt to address that in a moment. Thank you, Councillor Findlow. Councillor Dean, please.
Yes, thank you. This is one maybe for Mr. Hurdis. We've heard a lot about parking, and I have my own views on that. But my question to you is, the road outside, the main road, Handforth Road, are there any parking restrictions such as double yellow lines there, or is it a part of the public highway which is available for parking?
Thank you, Councillor Dean. And finally, Councillor Puddicombe, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, seeking some clarification about the referral to the Secretary of State has mentioned at the bottom of page 23, top of page 24, and Councillor Burkill mentioned it as well. I mean, perhaps Mr. Wakefield could confirm that we're not just going through the motions here, but if we do approve it today, could the Secretary of State then refuse it and vice versa?
Thank you, Councillor Puddicombe. My understanding is that is the case, but I'll invite Mr. Wakefield to come back on those questions and then go to Mr. Hurdis to invite a comment on any parking restrictions on Hamforth/Wilmslow Road. Thank you. Mr. Wakefield, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So I think Councillor Harewood's query question the sort of proven need, if you like, in light of the figures that are quoted on page 18 under the heading need for the development. Now, as we've said, this is a site that does have an extant permission for a 60-bed care home that was considered back in January of last year, and at the time there was an overwhelming support from Matter Services agreeing with the identified need at that time. Obviously, since then we've had the implications of COVID, which has had consequences in terms of care home occupancy, should we say, which has led to these the vacancies that are stated within Adult Services response that's quoted at the bottom of page 18. But I think from an officer's point of view, I think we just look at it in two ways, really. One, that this is a snapshot in time of a very unique situation that we currently find ourselves in, as opposed to a demonstration of any absence of need or any absence of any future need, but also the fact that it's got permission for 60 bedrooms and it's looking for another 3 now. The provision of 3 additional bedrooms is in officers' minds not considered to have any sort of material impact on relevant planning matters. So it's for that reason that it's been put forward with a positive recommendation. I think in terms of the loss of the facilities that Councillor Finlow referred to on page 19, I did cover that in the introduction. The applicant provided an explanation as to why it is being provided. It is being lost. There are other communal facilities, plenty of other communal facilities available to the residents, and these were just found not to be required within the approved scheme, and I think the applicants just felt that the space could be much better used, given the amount of communal facilities that are provided for. I think the plans show the extent of communal facilities, if you like, because if you look on the floor plans within your key plans, the bedrooms are in a sort of a darker, what colour is it? Salmony colour, perhaps. And then the communal ones are those lighter facilities. So there's quite a good degree of communal facilities provided within the building already. So that the lounge and the terraces that are lost as part of this proposal can quite easily be accommodated. The loss of them can be easily accommodated with the alternative provision elsewhere. Then I'll leave Councillor Dean's query to Mr. Hurdis, but then Councillor Puddicombe's query about referral to the Secretary of State. Yes, so should members be minded to approve the application, then yes, it would be referred to the Secretary of State, and they will make a decision on whether or not to intervene on the application. So they may come back and say they do not wish to intervene in this particular case, and then we are free to make a decision or issue the decision based on members' resolution today. Alternatively, they could conclude that they do wish to intervene, and they will consider the application themselves on its merits and come to a decision, whatever decision they say fit. So that whatever decision they see fit, sorry. So that could be one of approval or refusal. but at the moment it's not a case of members going through the motions. It's important that members come to a resolution on the application today, so to allow us to refer it to the Secretary of State. And I'll just defer to Mr. Hurdis regarding the parking. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Wakefield. Mr. Hurdis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just going back to Councillor Dean's question there in relation to, I think, waiting restrictions, parking restrictions on Hanforth Road outside of the site. I actually went to the site yesterday, so I can confirm there are no waiting restrictions, double yellow lines, any type of parking restriction on Hanforth Road outside of the site. I've had a look at the appeal decision back in 2019, and the inspector did consider this issue in relation to potential overspill and potential parking on the highway, and the likelihood of that actually taking place on Hanforth Road. And what they said is important because it's material. We have to take notice of what they say. There are a higher power in that essence. So they actually said the nature and configuration of the highway outside of the site is likely to deter on-road parking. So that's what they said. So their view was, if there was any issue with on-site parking, the nature and the configuration of the highway, so for example, their view would probably be people wouldn't feel comfortable with parking on that. It's a B classification road, so a relatively higher order road. They would not want to do that. So that was their view. So to answer your question, Councillor, there aren't any restrictions there. It was looked at and considered in 2019 by the inspector, and they said that it wouldn't be an issue in terms of encouraging parking in that area. So I hope that helps answer that question.
Thank you, Mr. Hurdis. I can see that Councillor Smitham would like to come back with a question, please.
Yes, it was regarding the 21 care home of mixed use that was referred to on page 14. It says within the primary care network boundary, and I would like to have a brief idea of what that boundary is, please. And I guess it's not available at the moment, but how many people would that represent that might need the care home in future? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I'll just take a quick call for any further questions, then I'd like to close the question list, take the response and move on to the debate. Okay, so I'll ask Mr. Wakefield if he can provide a response to the question that's just been asked, please.
I don't think I can, sorry, Chairman, unfortunately. Sorry.
Right, okay, thank you. In that case, I'll move to the debate, and could I have a volunteer to lead us in the debate, please? Thank you. Councillor McFarlane.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not really sure where to start. A year ago, the committee rejected the 60-bed application, and now there's one for a 63-bed. I can only follow Councillor Burkhill's comments that it's he said in the past, quite true. It's in the middle of a residential area. There's been a huge amount of local opposition, and I'm sorry that we're not really respecting their wishes. It may not be planning, but a lot of people are very worried about this. Mr. Trainor's comments regarding the access to the area is absolutely true. I know the 130 bus routes, and I appreciate Mr. Hurdis's comments, but for 47 of a staff, I can only say that they've got to get to this home somehow, and I think that's maybe a problem, but I shall listen to the rest of the debate and speak later, perhaps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. Who would like to go next? I can see that Mr. Wakefield's hand's gone back up, so I'll just go to him first and then move to Councillor Findlow and Councillor Dean. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, just in light of Councillor McFarlane's comments, which I acknowledge, I just again want to just reiterate the fact that a 60-bed care home and the principle of a care home on the site sorry. So a 60-bed care home and the principle of a care home on the site has already been established through the appeal that was allowed. So that those issues and sort of matters of principle in terms of a care home within a residential area, the access and the parking standards have been justified previously. So I think, again, I just want to try and focus members' attention to the 3 additional bedrooms and the potential impact that they would have over and above the extant permission that's already in place. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Wakefield. Councillor Findler, your hand's gone down again, I think. Still wish to speak?
Yes, okay. I was only going to comment about the what Mr. Hurd has said. And what I think it seems to boil down to, therefore, is that we are dependent on the goodwill and good sense, not always presence, as we know, alas, of motorists to not park on the main road. That's the way I translate it. I would say, while speaking, Chairman, I do think this is the most unfortunate situation we've been placed in. The whole planning system is out of balance. The developer can always appeal. Local people can't. The decisions of this committee representing local people is overridden by one person, albeit a highly qualified inspector, who takes decisions overriding the local democratic wish. And this is a classic example of it. I protest. Doesn't do any good, I know, but I protest nonetheless.
Thank you, Councillor Findler. Councillor Harewood, please.
Thank you.
You've gone back on mute, Councillor Harewood.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. This planning is built on a need that has not been justified. It is built on a snapshot in time, said Mr. Wakefield, on the idea of care and age. Why? If there was a need, okay. And I'm so sorry that it has been, because that's what it's built on, nothing else. Why is it that planning cannot link to that need at all, but just on a building? I fear that if there was a need, I would have agreed, but I can't see why you need something when you have over 600 vacancies. Thank you, Chair. That's how I'm sorry, that's how I see the debate. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Harewood. Councillor Dean, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, I was going to perhaps put some of the other arguments forward. I'm still not decided in my own mind here, but my big concern is that we are fighting against an undeniable force here, in that the inspector has overturned our previous decision. So the question is really, do the 3 extra bedrooms
Councillor Dean, we've lost you.
You've gone offline.
Yeah, no, it would appear Councillor Dean's gone offline. I'll move on to Councillor, I think it's Councillor Puddicombe next, and then Councillor Mannion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Mr. Wakefield said because the principle has been allowed, you know, we should. I think I saw almost took the implication he was saying because the principle's been allowed, we should overcome our objections today and pass this. But I mean, if I still don't think it's right, I'm not going to approve this. I think it is the right saga, really, and I would have to question the people behind this application, their competency in not realising that there was too much communal space in their original application, and so coming back with this additional 3 bedrooms. Now, the parking may have been proven to have been right at other sites, even though it's below our standards, but it has to be taken into account that there are quite a few more staff now with the extra bedrooms. And then on the point of the proven need, on page 18, it does state that typically pre-COVID, vacancy levels were between 150 and 200. And I accept that with care home occupancy, it's all in a state of flux at the moment. But if there were vacancy levels pre-COVID, then I cannot see that there is a proven need for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Puddicombe. I see that Councillor Dean is now back online again. I believe he was only offline for a matter of seconds, probably only 10 seconds or so, so I don't think you missed anything substantive. But if you could confirm that, and please continue with what you were saying previously.
Thank you. I think it was a very short period. I mean, I heard what Councillor Puddicombe said. What I was going to say was that I'm sort of two minds of this, because I agree with an awful lot of the objections. I'm especially concerned about parking, because I've got personal experience when my mother was in a local home but never been able to park there in the actual parking spaces. It was impossible. It was always overfull. And it seems it's difficult to park outside this one, so that does concern me. But on the other hand, it doesn't concern the inspector, and he's the person who has already said, even with the 65 bedroom application, that the parking was okay. So I feel as though I'm sort of going to be overpowered on that. The question is the 3 bedrooms. Do the 3 bedrooms, in our view, make this application unacceptable to a theoretical inspector? Because there's no point in us refusing this, and then it goes to the inspector and he just overturns us again. And I personally can't see 3 bedrooms, extra bedrooms, making that much difference to an inspector. So I feel between a rock and a hard place here. I feel like objecting to this, but I fear it will be a waste of our time and money.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Mannion, please.
Councillor Dean summed it up for me. Indeed, I think I was out of step with the committee when this was refused. I have read I think I voted in favour of it, or I didn't vote for refusal. In the light of the inspector's comments, I do think, and while I empathise with local residents' concerns about it, I do think we are between a rock and a hard place. I note Councillor Finlow's comments about the planning system at times does seem to be out of sync or kilter with local democratic desires. But again, we have to look at this on purely planning grounds, and it's on balance. And unfortunately, on balance, the 3 extra units, I think if we were to refuse, there would be an appeal. And indeed, the applicant made some rather disparaging comments about our previous decision when we refused, which certainly didn't enamour them to myself anyway. But I think we have little alternative than to accept the officer's recommendations, because if we were to refuse, they would appeal, and it may cost the council a considerable amount of money. So I think on planning ground and on balance, I think we need to accept the officer's recommendation, and I'm happy to propose that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mannion. I'm just making a note of that proposal for approval, and then I'll move to Councillor Holland, please.
Smetham.
Sorry, Councillor Smetham. I believe you were first, and then Councillor Holland.
Thank you. Yes, a lot of things I've made a note of to say I don't need to now, because they have already been said. The only one thing that is left now, excuse me, for me to say is that I think we need to look carefully at how this looks out in the community and with our colleagues elsewhere. What would it do to our reputation if we did continue with our previous approach? I don't want to say any more further than that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smetham, and Councillor Holland now, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, in light of what the 3 previous speakers have said, I tend to agree. We've once again been put in an impossible position. You know, I can remember turning up to this site visit and there'd been a whole host of residents who really were against this. And it is about need at the end of the day. And is this required? I think it goes against what, as a council, we believe in. We are trying to get people to stay in their homes in their latter years because it is more beneficial mentally and physically to be there. But now we're opening up care homes that may become, you know, derelict in 10, 20 years time. But I do agree that to go to appeal again would be a very unfortunate set of circumstances also. I do think it's quite disparaging though that they want to do this. They have gone to appeal, they've got it passed. And it also seems as if it's a little bit piecemeal sometimes. So therefore, they won't have to provide any extra car parking for these 3 care rooms. There will be extra revenue that they will get on three extra bedrooms in this care home, and I think that all really should be taken into consideration when these matters are considered. And is there a contribution from the developers for these 3 extra bedrooms? Is that a consideration that we can think about? But yeah, I think we're in an impossible position, but I do think that it would be a tragedy for it to go to appeal yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Yes, from my own point of view, I find myself very much in agreement with the previous speakers, and where I find myself on balance very much in line with how Councillor Dean explained it. I find it highly regrettable that an individual planning inspector has seen fit to overturn the decision that this committee arrived at previously, democratically, and taking into account the views of all who submitted representations. But that is where we are, and so unfortunately I'm seeing this as an application, not as an application for 63 beds, but rather an application for 3 beds, 60 of which have already regrettably been approved, and the principle of development has been approved also. So it has been proposed by Councillor Mannion for approval. Does that proposal have a seconder at this stage, please?
I'll second it, Councillor Dean, Chairman. I'm happy to second it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dean. Are there any further contributors before I go back to our officers for final comment and advice? Mr. Traynor, could I ask you to turn your camera off, please? Thank you. I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so I'll go back to our planning officer, Mr. Wake. Oh, sorry, right at the last minute, Councillor McFarlane.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've listened to the speakers, and I find it very regrettable as well, but we are looking at the 60 beds have been decided on, and this is just another bit on top of that, and that's what we must look at. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Wakefield, any final comments or words of advice before we go to the vote?
No, thank you, Chairman. Just one thing, actually. Councillor Holland referred to any contributions that were being secured as part of the proposal. As part of the appeal scheme and the previously allowed scheme, we did secure a contribution towards healthcare, which would also apply to this application as well, for the additional bedroom. Well, it would apply to the 63 bedrooms as opposed to 60. So a proportionate contribution will be secured for healthcare as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Wakefield. So it has been proposed by Councillor Money and seconded by Councillor Dean for approval. I'll now move to the vote, calling each member in turn. Please indicate whether you are for, against or not voting on the proposal for approval, starting with Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Reluctantly for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dean, please.
Also reluctantly for.
Thank you. Councillor Findlow.
Still having the courage of my convictions, against.
Thank you. Councillor Harewood, please.
Against.
Councillor Holland.
Another reluctantly for.
Thank you. Councillor McFarlane.
Sorry, Chair, I shall abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Mannion, please.
4, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Murphy is absent. Councillor Nicholas, please.
4, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Puddicombe.
Not voting.
Councillor Smetham.
4.
Thank you. And myself, Councillor Craig Brown, also reluctantly 4. So if you just bear with me, colleagues, I'll tot up the numbers. Okay, thank you for your indulgence, members. So that is the vote is recorded as 7 votes in favour of approval, 2 against, with 2 abstentions. So that is clearly carried. Thank you very much. And we'll now move on then to item 6, the next application, which is application number 20/1432M, the demolition of an existing bungalow and erection of 2 dwelling houses at number 12 Bollin Hill, Wilmslow, on behalf of Tilda Properties Limited. And again, could I invite our planning officer, Paul Wakefield, to present this application. Mr. Wakefield, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just share my screen. So, so this is number 12 Bollin Hill in Wilmslow, within the Bollin Hill Conservation Area. As you can see, it's a detached dwelling, single storey, with a detached outbuilding and surrounding gardens at present, surrounded by other residential properties as well within the conservation area. Just put to a bit of wider context, you can see the application site edged red within the centre of the screen there. And then just at the bottom of the page, you can just see the car park to the cars public park, and which sort of signifies the outskirts of Wilmslow town centre, if you like, at the bottom of the screen there. A few photographs of the application site. You can just see the existing dwelling on the right hand side, the chimney at the top there. Behind the existing frontage, which is quite well landscaped at the moment. Then again, the existing access, which leads up to the detached garage driveway. And then again, just showing the access drive with the existing property just on the right hand side. Then again, the left hand side showing the relationship with number 14, which is a property to the left hand side as you look from Bollin Hill. Number 14 is a 2-storey property, by the way, as is number 10, which sits on the other side. So there's number 14 again, looking across the sort of front garden, if you like, of the existing property. And then this is the boundary of the application site to number 10. There is an access drive that sits between the application site boundary and the boundary to number 10, which provides further sort of separation distance, if you like, between the 2 properties. Number 10, incidentally, as we'll come on to, excuse me, is one of the Halliday, Patterson and Agate, if that's the right way to pronounce it, dwellings, which are the trio of architects that have designed some of the houses, or several of the houses, within the Bollin Hill Conservation Area. And then again, so the existing house, this is from the back garden, number 10 in the background here, with the large chimney coming from the fairly substantial slope roof. But you can see the existing property, single story, with a few outbuildings serving it as well. But it is in quite an overgrown state at the moment. Again, further views of the existing house. And then the front, excuse me, front elevation of the existing house with the conservatory on the side. You can just see the edge of number 10 on the far right hand side of the photograph there. And then this is number 10. As I said before, it's one of these Halliday, Patterson and Agate properties. And similarly, another example of other properties within the area built by those same architects or created by the same architects. This is numbers 4 and 6, which I think just sits on the corner slightly further down the road from the application property. So the proposed site layout, as members will have seen within their key plans, there are 2 dwellings proposed in keeping with the building line that's established within the Bolin Hill area, of differing designs. Each has its own separate access with front and rear gardens. Then the elevations, just the front elevations, the remainders are within the key plans that members have got. So this is number 12. Sorry, let me get my bearing. So this is the left-hand side one. On the left-hand side image is the left-hand side property as you look from Bolin Hill, and the right-hand side one is the right-hand side property. So the right-hand side one is that which will sit next to number 10 and the access drive. And then again, street scene. So some of the vegetation is proposed to be retained within the front garden areas, but of course access is being created for the right hand side property. And then you can see at the bottom the silhouettes of the dwellings as proposed, how they will fit within the street scene. So it's these 2 properties here, 12B on the right and 12A on the left. And that's it, Chairman. So for the reasons set out in the report, it is recommended for approval. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wakefield. So I'll now move on to the public speakers. We have 2 registered again for this item. So I'd now like to call on the first of those, Councillor Stockton, who is the ward councillor. Councillor Stockton, if you'd like to turn on your camera and microphone, and you have 5 minutes speaking time from whenever you're ready.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and good morning, members of the committee. I call this in because of local people's wishes to protect a beautiful area of historic Wilmslow. As we've mentioned, it was built just after the First World War by Manchester architects Halliday, Patterson and Agate. The National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 130, states that permission should be refused for design that fails to improve the character and quality of an area. I will argue here that you should dismiss the recommendation for approval from the report. A refusal would enable the area to remain what it currently is, a low-density, high-quality housing area in accordance with the Macclesfield Borough Local Plan, and would protect the Bolin Hill Conservation Area. The development is out of context with the neighbourhood, as it is detrimental to the Bolin Hill Conservation Area. The scale, mass and design will harm the conservation area and significantly alter the street scene, requiring 2 driveways instead of 1, opening up the site as viewed from the road, making the proposed buildings even more intrusive than they would otherwise be. The houses will have a negative impact on the special local character of what was originally designed along the lines of a garden city, when the term garden wasn't just used to increase sales. Yes, over the fullness of time, incremental infill has on occasion been granted in the area, but this when the environment and street scene was not as valued as it is today. This development would represent further damage, and a line should now be drawn. Essentially, the argument is simple. 2 large, 2-storey detached houses with access for vehicles inevitably has a much greater impact on the neighbours than the character of Bolin Hill than the existing modest semi-dormer bungalow. Quoting the officer's report, overall, due to the existing high-quality plot, the site as it currently is makes a positive contribution to the conservation area. That's as it currently is. The replacement or replacements must therefore preserve this position or enhance to be in keeping with the policy and guidance. Yes, you can reduce the scale of the houses slightly and increase the distance between them to 3.5 metres, but this has been done simply to scrape into what developers think are the minimum changes necessary to make it difficult for the committee to refuse, whilst retaining maximum profitability. However, there is significant policy on which this application should be refused without fear of appeal. In context, the proposal represents overdevelopment and has to be seen to realise that the footprint to plot size number of 22% quoted in the report is just that, a number. It cannot, in this instance anyway, describe the setting and the built form. Neither does it take into account the bulk and height. It simply compares footprints with plot size. A 60s style block of flats would have a low footprint, but the bulk would make it overbearing and overdevelopment. Policy SD2 states that development should contribute positively to an area's character and identity, creating or reinforcing local distinctiveness in terms of height, scale, form and grouping. You have already seen that it doesn't. Policy SE1 states that developments make a positive contribution to their surroundings in terms of the following sense of place, for example. The Bollin Hill Conservation Area was designed as a garden city. Splitting the plot in half makes two lesser quality plots and the demolition detracts still further. How can this then be improved by the development of two houses on two plots? It doesn't. There should be two separate applications before you, not a requirement, just a view, because there will be two sites made from one, and that is precisely the point. It represents garden grabbing and is out of context in the neighbourhood. In less lockdown times, I was invited by local people to visit the area with Councillor Brooks of Wilmslow Town Council with regard to residents updating the conservation area. Anyway, I will ask, and I can hear you, I will ask that you vote to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stockton. Any questions from members of the committee, please? I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so it looks as though you've got off lightly on this occasion, Councillor Stockton.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Please now turn off your camera and microphone, and I will invite the next speaker. So I'd now like to invite Mr. Ball, who is representing the applicant, to address the committee. Please turn on your camera and microphone. Mr. Ball, you have 3 minutes, and please begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. My name is Andrew Ball, representing Tilda Properties. We're the architects who designed the properties for number 12 Bolling Hill. The National Planning Policy Framework in England sets out the government's planning policies and how these are expected to be applied. There are numerous references within the document supporting residential development. The framework seeks to support sustainable development, boost housing supply, promote effective use of land, particularly brownfield sites, promote effective use of underutilised land. National policy filters down to local planning policy and informs the local plans and strategies. The Council's key principle for new development is to contribute positively to an area's character and identity. The proposal before you seeks approval for the replacement of a low-quality single dwelling with two high-quality detached properties within the Bollin Hill Conservation Area. When working in a conservation area, we produce designs that both preserve and enhance the area and protect it as a heritage asset. The designs reflect the characteristics of the area in terms of scale and massing, materials used, and the varied and individual nature of the neighbouring dwellings and the space between adjacent properties. The proposed properties have intentionally been designed differently, one being more traditional and one more contemporary, contributing to the varied style of properties we see along Bollin Hill. High quality materials and detailing are proposed on both properties. The setting of the dwellings is equally important. As replacement dwellings, it is essential for these not to be overly dominant on the site and what one might consider overdevelopment. As a result, the spacing between the properties exceeds the spacing seen between many properties along Bollin Hill. The footprint to plot size for the two properties are 19.9% and 21%, and this falls below the 22% of the adjacent property, which was granted planning approval in 2016. The designs have been considered by the council and found to be in line with local planning policies, in particular the heritage policy, hence preserving the conservation area in which they sit. My client is happy to accept the conditions proposed in the planning officer's report. As the principle of development is acceptable and is aligned with national and local planning policy, we request that planning approval is granted today. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ball. Could I ask, are there any questions from members of the committee, please? Councillor Dean, yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ball. In your contribution, you mentioned Brownfield Sites. Are you claiming that this site with a bungalow on is actually a brownfield site by definition?
Yeah, a site that previously has been developed and then would be redeveloped via the demolition of the previous building will be classed as a brownfield site.
Okay, that's not my understanding, but I'll check it with the officers. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions, members, please? I'm not seeing anybody indicating, so in that case, thank you very much, Mr. Ball. If I could ask you to now turn off your camera and microphone, but please do feel free to remain in the meeting. So at this point, I will go back to our planning officer, Mr. Wakefield, just to ask whether there are any points that he wishes to address that were raised during the public speaking. Mr. Wakefield, please.
Thank you, Chairman. No, nothing specific, although I will just pick up on Councillor Dean's point that I think he was perhaps alluding to the definition of previously developed land within the National Planning Policy Framework. It does exclude land in built-up areas such as residential gardens. So I think that's what Councillor Dean was probably getting at. So
yeah, thank you. Thank you for that.
But other than that, Chairman, nothing else at the moment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wakefield. So at this point, are there any questions from members that you would like to put to our planning officer or indeed highways officer in respect of this application? Could I come to Councillor Smetham, please?
Thank you. I don't know what's happened to my chat function. It seems to have disappeared, hope temporarily. I wondered if I could ask the planning officer if the existing bungalow still has permitted development rights on it. Thank you. And also one other question. Do we have an up-to-date housing supply figures for Cheshire East, please?
Thank you, Councillor Smetham. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Could the officer tell us how old the existing bungalow is? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braithwaite. Councillor Holland, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was just a little bit confused about there's a reference to Halliday, Patterson and Agate, which is obviously a reputable house builder in that area, and I'm a bit confused as to whether this bungalow was constructed by that builder. And there's obviously reference to the Garden City as well. So I just wondered whether we could be a little bit more enlightened on that, because I'm reading it and I'm still a bit confused. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. That is as I understood it, but we'll see clarity from Mr Wakefield. Councillor McFarlane, please.
Yes, Chair, I'd like to perhaps get clarity on whether or not other houses in this conservation area have been similarly split up in the past. Does he have any knowledge on that by any chance, please?
Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. Any further questions before I go back to Mr Wakefield, please? Not seeing anybody indicating, so Mr Wakefield, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We do have our conservation officer with us as well today, so I might defer to Rachel Hamilton to answer some of the questions. But for now, just in terms of permitted development rights, Councillor Sweatham, as far as I'm aware, yes, the existing property would have permitted development rights available to it, subject to particular limitations within conservation areas. But yeah, as far as I'm aware, they would still be in place. Housing supply figures, I don't have precise up-to-date figures other than to say we do, of course, still have our 5-year housing land supply. But I can't be any more specific than that at the moment, unfortunately. Councillor Braithwaite's query about how old the existing bungalow is, I must admit I'm not too sure. Whether Rachel can add to that. Similarly with Councillor Holland's queries about the Halliday Patterson and Agate dwellings, I'll probably just defer to Rachel for that as well. But Councillor McFarlane's query about other applications for subdivision, I'll tell you what, I'll come back. Can I just see if Rachel, our conservation officer, has got anything to add, and I'll just look into that while she's speaking, if that's okay. Thank you, Chairman.
Absolutely fine. Thanks, Mr Wakefield. It's very helpful when we're discussing an application that does fit in within a conservation area to have a conservation officer present. So could I invite Mrs Hamilton to address some of the conservation related issues that have been raised?
Good morning all. Good morning, Chair. Councillor Braithwaite's comment regarding the age of the bungalow, I would suggest it is mid-20th century, probably 1960s. Councillor Holland, the Halliday Patterson Agate buildings were built post-war and are of an arts and crafts style. The bungalow, I think, is an infill in a gap that was left after that development. They were built in phasing in several phases. The Halliday Patterson Agate buildings, and number 10 is one of those buildings, the one that lies to the right of the site. And in fact, 12B has been designed to sort of replicate some of the qualities of those original buildings. Yeah, I will leave Paul to answer the question regarding the construction on similar plots.
Thank you very much, Mrs Hamilton. And just while I give Mr Wakefield a little bit longer to dig out that information, I can see that Councillor Findlow would like to ask a question, so I'll go to you next, Councillor Findlow.
I'm interested in the conservation aspects of this and honouring the principles and practice of this conservation area. So I'm wondering if we create a precedent here for this area in granting permission, and that was replicated elsewhere in that area, the same area, i.e. 2 for 1. I've seen 3 and 4 to 1 for one building in my ward. What impact would that have on the consultation area? The cumulative impact would surely be deleterious. Question mark.
Mrs Hamilton, please.
So obviously we have to consider each site on its own merits. When I looked at this scheme, I felt there was capacity in this context, in this group of buildings, and looking at the buildings to the left, for 2 additional properties on the site, because of the width of this site and the nature of the grouping of the houses adjacent. That's not to say we would consider the same on other plots within the conservation area. I mean, each site considered on its own merits and within its own context.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wakefield, are we able to now come back to you on the question of the housing figures?
Oh, sorry, it was the proposals for similar proposals within the area that I was just looking into. I think that there have been some, not many. Obviously, depends how far you go back, I suppose, to the extent to which you could to say that we've had, but there have been some. I think that's as much as I can say. Really, I can't be any more specific because, I mean, you know, we could go back to sort of 1990 and identify them, and obviously there are different ages of properties within the Bolland Hill Conservation Area, but I don't think there's been a particularly many. I suppose that's probably the best way to put it, but there have been some. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks very much, Mr. Wakefield. So I think that's the end of the questions. So could I now have a volunteer to open the debate on this item, please? Councillor Findlay, please. Thank you for volunteering.
Well, there was an ominous silence. I wouldn't object, Chairman, to a single enlarged replacement in keeping property or even a replacement property on this site in keeping with the principles of the conservation area and that famous firm, well, they're not architects, A. Caton, etc., rather than builders. I'm not entirely sure. Wouldn't object to that at all, and I would have thought it's entirely feasible to enlarge or even replacing on an in-keeping basis the existing bungalow, which has been empty for a year or so, I think we're told. I have seen this ball start rolling in my ward and elsewhere. The ball in question is 2 for 1, 3 to 1, 4 to 1. I'm referring, of course, to 2 properties for 1 existing, 3 properties for 1 existing, and we've been up in Presby to 4 properties for 1 existing. It involves cramming, it involves being out of character with the surrounding area, and my goodness, it annoys local people, and I can well understand why. So once you've started this ball rolling, the precedent is created, and developers quite understandably latch onto the possibilities that open up. And you end up with a cumulative impact of changing the character of the area. In this case, being a conservation area, it's even more important that its character be retained. So I do have reservations on those grounds. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Findlay. Councillor Harewood, please. I think you're on mute, Councillor Harewood.
Sorry, I was thinking I was probably going to speak first in approving this application for these reasons. I cannot see cramming when the space is so large, and there's enough width, and maybe the sizes of houses are not onerous to jeopardize any character or garden idea. In fact, it helps it to take off a bungalow that is no more in use, been empty for some time, and give reasonable accommodation to 2 houses in a generous space. So I will, I don't think it jeopardizes the adjacent properties. So I will begin by saying I'm in favor of the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Harewood. I've got Councillor McFarlane, then Councillor Puddicombe, then Councillor Dean. Thank you. Councillor McFarlane, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think the points to consider are that this is a low-density housing area, and it is a conservation area, and it would set a precedent, I feel, and I think that's one which we must keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McFarlane. Councillor Puddicombe, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Halliday Patterson were indeed architects of great repute, operating mostly in the 1920s. I think they built some wonderful houses, and I personally think that these houses will, on this application, will fit in with the area nicely. And as the agent said, they will replace a low-quality single dwelling with 2 high-quality homes, and I think there's ample room for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Puddicombe. Councillor Dean, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In principle, I'm very much in agreement with Councillor Finlow in that we're in danger of losing the character of many of our areas in the north of this borough due to the creeping filling up of garden space with 2-for-1, 3-for-1 houses. This committee has refused 2 within 100 yards of where I live recently. One was a 2-for-1 and one was a 3-for-1, and the inspector has overturned, rather surprisingly, both of those. And I say surprisingly because one of them was specifically against a policy very clearly in the neighbourhood plan. So the inspector must have a different interpretation of the English language, I think. So on the basis of the fact that the conservation officer has said that these designs are acceptable, and I do agree with Councillor Harewood that they do appear to fit in. They don't seem that big in this particular case. I'm afraid I'm going to have to go for approval.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. So I've now also got Councillors Braithwaite, Holland and Smetham. So Councillor Braithwaite first, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I agree with Councillor Puddicombe and Councillor Dean. The proposed buildings are an improvement on what's there already and provide good quality accommodation, and they don't appear as keeping with the street scene, and I'm minded to approve also. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland, please.
Yes, thanks once again, Chair. Yeah, I agree. I think I'm not in favour of demolishing bungalows because I think they're highly in need. However, I don't think this has, I know it's all subjective, but it's not particularly aesthetically pleasing to the eye. And I do think the developer on this occasion has looked into all the backgrounds of previous developers and the impact and importance of those developers and tried to create a plan that conforms to that. I don't think it will be overdevelopment. And I think in this modern day, people do not want large gardens in principle because they don't have the time to tend to them. So I haven't made my mind up yet, but I'm veering towards in favour of this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. Councillor Smetham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't need to say anything now. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your brevity. Councillor Mannion, in that case, please. Councillor Mannion.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I couldn't find the button. I've listened to the debate, especially from and the information from our officers. I'm not that familiar with the area, but I am conscious of the fact that what were space standards that were appropriate and applicable in the 1960s, never mind the 1920s, are now, I won't say out of date, but it's quite clear that space standards are now much more restricted. Again, some of the town centre conversions that I've come across have incredibly small space standards. Some of the developments on former greenbelt sites are proposed have incredibly small gardens. I think they've been described as postage stamps. So I think, you know, rather than to increase the pressure on greenfield areas for further development, I think, you know, we will see more applications such as this coming forward. And in this case, I think it's been done in it's of high quality and some sensitivity. and therefore on this occasion, again, I'm happy to accept the officer's recommendation, and in an effort to move the matter forward, I would propose that that is what we do. We accept the officer's recommendation for approval in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that proposal, Councillor Mannion. I'll just make a note of that. Does that proposal have a seconder, please?
Happy to second.
Yes, Chair.
I'm taking a seconding of that from Councillor Holland. Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak before I go back to the officer on this? I'll just share a few thoughts of my own. I mean, I find myself very much in sympathy with the words of Councillor Findlow earlier on. We see these types of applications coming forwards an awful lot in our ward, particularly where they're in the conservation area. And my understanding is the policy requirement is that they're required to enhance the conservation area. And I'm not at the moment fully convinced that they do that. I also find the demolition of and the loss of bungalow accommodation to be regrettable. We've just been hearing when discussing the previous application, there's a need for elderly accommodation. And I also note with these applications to subdivide plots, we're seeing yet again proposal coming forward for 5-bedroom properties. It's never 3-bedroomed, is it? It's never something of a more modest scale and scope. So I'm not convinced at the moment on this, but I'm willing to take into account the views of others. I'm not seeing anybody else indicating they'd like to speak, so in that case I'll just go back to, oh sorry, Councillor Findlow, and then I'll go back to our planning officer for some final thoughts and words of advice. Councillor Findlow.
Thank you. I do understand what you're saying, Chairman, and I have to say this application is better in terms of the quality of what is on offer than many others I've seen of a 2, 3 and 4 for 1 basis. It is the principle and the cumulative impact that bothers me, and the more we approve these applications, the more difficult it comes further down the line to draw a line. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Findlow. So I'll now just come back to our planning officer, Mr. Wakefield, for any final comments and advice before moving to the vote. Thank you, Mr. Wakefield.
Thank you, Chairman. I suppose the only thing I would say is I understand members' concerns regarding cumulative impact, but as Mrs. Hamilton pointed out, you know, we assess applications, each one on their merits. This site is very is relatively unique in its spacing and particular qualities within the conservation area. So it's not something that's immediately evident that could be repeated elsewhere. But I think the key point is that we're assessing this application on its merits, which Mrs. Hamilton's explained in terms of the conservation area. That's acceptable, and the report outlines the impact on neighbours, etc., is also acceptable. So other than that, Chairman, no, nothing further to add. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. Wakefield. So with that, I will move to the vote. So I'd like to invite each member of the committee in turn to indicate whether they are for, against or not voting on the proposal of approval. It's been proposed by Councillor Mannion and seconded by Councillor Holland for approval. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Dean.
Reluctantly for, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Findlow.
Against.
Councillor Harewood.
For.
Councillor Holland.
For, Chair.
Councillor McFarlane.
Against.
Councillor Mannion.
For.
Councillor Nicholas.
Also against.
Councillor Puddicombe.
For.
Councillor Smetham.
For.
And myself, Councillor Craig Brown, against. So just bear with me, colleagues, whilst we do the numbers. Okay, thank you, members. So that is carried for 7 votes in favour, and 4 votes against approval, so that is clearly carried for approval. Thank you, members. I'll move on to the next item, item 7, and then look to take a lunch break at the end of that item. So our next application, item 7, application number 20/2211M, is an outline application for proposed park and ride facility, including associated infrastructure on land north of Station Road, Hanforth, and the applicant is Engine of the North. Could I now invite our planning officer, Adrian Crowther, for this application to make the presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, members. I think we're still just about morning. Okay, just bear with me while I this up. Please, can you confirm, Chair, that you can see that?
Yes, I can see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, members. So this, as the title states, is an outline planning application. So basically seeking the principle of the development of this site for a park and ride facility, and it says there, including associated infrastructure, land law for Station Road, Hanforth. So moving quickly on, this is a site edge red of the site. And I'll sort of explain in a bit more detail with some aerial photographs very shortly, but basically the site in question, see if I can find the... So the site in question consists of an area of grassland here, which is kind of amenity grassland, sort of a car parking area that sort of sits in the middle of the site, and then an area of basically scrub, which is kind of makes up, if you like, the sort of substantive part of the site in this area here. All this land sits immediately adjacent to the youth centre, which also, as I understand it, has a day nursery facility on there. So this is Old Road. It's just a small sort of stub road that leads to the railway line. So this is the main sort of north-south railway line through Hanforth, with Hanforth Station being in this location here. This obviously being the main station road. So that's kind of by way of a background, members. Okay. So just to give you sort of a bit more context from an aerial point of view. So again, this is the sort of the substantive part of the site, which is sort of an overgrown sort of scrub area here. Again, Hanforth Youth Centre, which sits in this location, which falls outside the site. Just for clarity, just remember the site edge red finished at this point here. So it's this area of grassland in this location. The access to the site is off Old Road, as exists at the moment. And again, we have the main sort of station road that runs along the frontage. Just to give a sort of bit of context of the area. So adjoining the site, you've got an area of woodland on the eastern boundary here. You've got the end of a cul-de-sac with 2 residential properties right at the extreme sort of eastern end of the site. You have a Roman Catholic church and its car parking area to the rear. So again, the boundary of the site runs along this hedge line here. We then have some sort of a substation in this location here. I'm sorry, members, I think it's an electricity substation, but I can't be 100% sure of that. It wasn't immediately apparent on the actual building itself. And then you've got a mix here. You've got a public house, and various sort of residential properties across the road here on Old Lane itself. And again, Hanforth train station is located here. Okay, this is a proposed site plan. So remember, members, this is an outline application. So this is an illustrative site plan. So in other words, this is indicating how the site could be laid out. If this application would be supported today, this would not be an approved drawing, but it just gives you an indication of how the site could actually be laid out and how it could all be accommodated, if you like. So if you like, the site is subdivided so that you have an access point here off Old Lane that then forms a circulation system, and this is quite important, so that it would allow a bus facility to come and use that as sort of an in and out, if you like. So you come in off Old Lane, through the site and then round and then back out onto Station Road. So that would then be an access, an exit only, if you like. There's then the bus facility here. So this would form effectively the bus stop. Got some indication here of some cycle racks. So obviously cyclists can park in this location as well as cars. And then you have 2 car parking areas, one to the north in this location, and then the rest that sort of follows, if you like, the natural shape of this land in this area here. Again, I repeat that the actual youth centre and its car parking area and the Scout hut in this location here remain unaffected by this development. You also see there's reference in the application to a proposal to do some modification works on the bridge over the railway line because the road here is particularly narrow and the footways on either side are particularly narrow at the same time. So that forms part of this application. Here we have a sort of more detailed drawing that shows, if you like, the access itself and how that will be disposed in terms of how that would actually be laid out with a crossing point here, so that follows the footpath around effectively through that point there. Okay. This is an application, a drawing that shows in more detail the bridge signals. So it shows how the carriageway could be narrowed down. So obviously you would have a stop line in this location here and on this location here, and it will also make that as one-way traffic, which would allow this apron, if you like, the pedestrian areas over the bridge to be widened. So we get a much wider footpath area here, which obviously would aid pedestrian access to and from the station itself, and obviously moving across Handforth at this point. This simply, members, is a tree constraints plan, which basically shows all the existing trees. You'll see there's reference in the report to the removal of some trees at the entrance in this area here. It's difficult to tell at this scale, unfortunately, but I'm sure you've seen it in the plan. Effectively, there are some trees in this particular point here, some sycamores that would need to be removed as a result of this. But you can see from the plans that before you, there is plenty of scope within this development to put replacement planting back in. Okay, some quick photographs. So this shows the site looking due east. Again, you've got the youth centre here. So this point is effectively would be the edge of the site. So this car parking area in question would remain undeveloped. You've got the area of scrubland to the south here, which we'll move swiftly onto. So to the north, again, the youth centre on the eastern boundary of the site. You've got an area of grassland here, which would form one of the car parking areas. Beyond, just for information, you've got the back of the industrial estate, which if you like, accesses to the north of the site. Okay, this is an area looking down towards the Roman Catholic Church. Again, the scrubland in the foreground here. And you can see the sort of the tree boundary on the northern boundary of the church, and the cul-de-sac in question sits in this location here. So the end of that cul-de-sac sits behind those trees in that location. This is looking back towards the main road, and obviously this is a photograph taken in the summer. And you can see here some of the trees on the frontage, and you can also see some of the trees in the distance. So they're on the far side. So the one I'm indicating there, that one is on the far side of Station Road. This is a photograph taken more recently, obviously trees not in leaf. Then it shows the access point. So the access point into the site effectively is where my cursor's moving here. So you can see the sort of the trees in question, the shrubby species, multi-stemmed. You've got these various sycamores and so on here, which the indication is that most of these ones in this particular area here would need to be removed to create this access in here. Okay. This is existing access off Old Lane, so you can see here the signage for the site. So the area of grassland that I've referred to before is in this area here. The area of scrubland sits in behind this location, again with the youth centre shown in the background. This is a reverse shot, effectively just showing the view back to the site, so back onto Old Lane. And I think we've got an existing shot here. So this is looking from effectively with my back to Station Road, looking down Old Hall Lane, and this is the existing access point here where the markers indicates that takes you into the actual site in question. And again, this is where the new access point would be effectively to the left of this old road sign. think members, oh no, sorry, one final photograph. So again, the access point effectively is there. So this is obviously Station Road, old roads leading into the back here. So the access point effectively is through this gap in here. Just quickly, just to do Station Road itself. So this is the approach, and this is looking from looking due west from the eastern side of the approach. So you can see the station sign in this location, and obviously the public house on this side. So you've got the footways leading up to it on both sides, and obviously that's the brow of the hill in the distance. And finally, looking back from the other way, again, you can just see the station sign here, and obviously showing here the indication that the footpaths are relatively narrow at these 2 points here, and again with the public house on the horizon there. Okay, members. So just to pick up one point, you'll see there's reference within the actual report itself to tree comments, and I'm happy to confirm that very 11th hour, but we've got the comments from the tree officer, and just for consistency, I will read verbatim the significant part of his comments, if you like, in relation to the removal of the trees. So he states, 2 individual trees, 2 groups of trees, and an overgrown hawthorn are proposed to be removed to accommodate the proposal. All are low quality category trees, apart from one moderate category group of early mature sycamore. The removal of this group and other low category trees will have a slight adverse impact on amenity within the immediate area. However, I'm satisfied that there is sufficient scope, as shown on the tree impact drawing, for mitigation of these losses as part of the detailed landscape proposal. And he's recommending an extension to the condition that's listed on page 49 of the report, which at the moment states condition 8 that says tree retention protection, and he's also recommending that is added to by and method statements, including supervision as part of any reserved matters application. That, members, is my presentation. So just bear me a second while I stop sharing that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crowder. So I could now move to public speaking on this item, and the first speaker registered is Councillor Burkill, who is the ward councillor. So Councillor Burkill, if I could ask you to again turn on your camera and microphone, and you have 5 minutes. Please begin whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, given the outstanding and the outstanding safety issues and other issues, including that no parking survey has been undertaken to assess the additional parking need, an outline application really is not appropriate for this proposal. 50 spaces are to be funded by the Garden Village proposal eventually, but this is not certain, and there's no assurance that the additional 51 spaces can be found or funded, particularly in the present financial climate. The existing footpaths to the station and into Handforth are too narrow and not fit for purpose, unsafe and impractical for modern standards of use by wheelchairs and buggies and cyclists and pedestrians. And discussions have been ongoing about widening the opposite side footpath to give the sufficient width. But again, there's no certainty of a resolution of that. Quite rightly, narrowing of the road over the bridge to be a signalled one and a one-way system has been abandoned, and that it seems to be in conflict with what's been said on page 43 in the end of the second paragraph. But all the discussions we've had so far is that that's not been going ahead, and they are widening the footpaths. The increase in traffic along Station Road by 1,400 vehicles a day since the opening of the A555 has shown this to be both impractical, and it would cause enormous queues affecting the junction with Wilmslow Road and other side roads. It has already been seen when roadworks have been taken place. And what would be the additional impact of traffic generated by the park and ride at peak times on Station Road, Wimslow Road and into Handforth? They already tried to turn right out of Station Road into the village is very, very poor when it gets to peak times and queues back. Basically, and based on the increase in traffic on Station Road and the number of vehicles using the car park, the visibility display should be increased from 2.4 metres by 43 metres to around 2.4 metres by 70 metres. And it's doubtful, even given the constraints, that either of these could be achieved. And I would like to see the evidence that these displays can actually be provided. It would be far more convenient for residents of the proposed garden village to use a more direct route by travelling down the bypass into Wilmslow Broadway Meadow car park, where there is a multi-storey car park is being considered adjacent to the Wilmslow station. So whilst there are both safety and practical issues remaining to be solved, it would be advisable to defer this application and return it to committee when a full application can be considered with all the issues properly assessed. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Burkill. Are there any questions from members, please, to the Ward Councillor? I'm not seeing anybody indicate. So in that case, Councillor Burkill, thank you. If you could turn off your camera and microphone, and I will invite.
Thank you very much.
Invite the next speaker. The next speaker on this item is Mr. Roger Small, who is representing the Handforth Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group and Friends of Handforth Station, an objector to the application. Mr. Small, if I could ask you to now prepare to address the committee, turn on your camera and microphone, please. And you have 3 minutes. Please begin whenever you're ready.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I apologise for my ugly mug delaying the start of this committee meeting somewhat earlier on. I am the chair of the Handforth Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, and I'm a member of the committee of the Friends of Handforth Station. I am authorised to present the views of both of these groups on this agenda item. I can say that we were very pleased to see that the case officer has recommended these plans for approval. It was in late 2018 that a consortium of Cheshire East Council, the Friends of Handforth Station, Handforth Parish Council, Northern Trains and Network Rail submitted a successful grant application to Access for All. A grant of more than £2 million was awarded in 2019 for the provision of a pair of lifts at Handforth Station, the provision of a station car park, a new pedestrian crossing on Station Road, and some widening of the footpath on the south side of Station Road all formed part of the overall scheme. When these plans come to fruition, wheelchair users will be able to park safely near the station. They will be able safely to cross Station Road and will be able to access the station platforms by means of the lifts. The proposed station car park will bring additional benefits to our village. For example, a recent report by WYG has indicated that by 2023, there will be a shortfall of 168 parking spaces in Handforth. Building the station car park will not eliminate that shortfall, but will reduce it to about 60 spaces. While we are very pleased about the benefits that the new station car park would bring, we are concerned that the plans include the possibility of singling carriageway over the railway bridge. In view of the traffic queues that might result, we believe this will prove very unpopular, not only with Handforth residents, but also with commuters whose daily journey involves the B5358. Traffic queues on the approaches to the bridge might even impair access to this proposed car park. We therefore urge Cheshire East Council to do all in their power to widen the footpath on the south side of Station Road without the singling of the carriageway over the railway bridge. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Small. Are there any questions from members, please? Councillor Findlay.
Could I just ascertain whether Mr. Small is overall in favour or against the application? He's down on our list of speakers as an objector. Is that correct or incorrect?
Yes, most definitely overall in favour of the application. I was cast in the form of an objecting wolf by Sarah Baxter simply because I had an objection to one component of this application.
But overall, you're in favour?
Oh, yes, indeed.
Thank you.
I would like to point out that this application is supported by policy H17 of the Hanforth Neighbourhood Plan.
Thank you.
Are you confident that all the other matters involved could be settled at the reserved stage?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
Are you content that all the other matters, as it's only an outline application, could be properly dealt with at the reserved subsequent stage, the reserved matters?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Harewood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Finlow has asked my questions. Is this gentleman in agreement? And he said yes. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Councillor Harewood. Are there any further questions, please, members? Councillor Smetham, please.
Yes, thank you. Am I understanding correctly that the objection that remains is the single carriageway over the railway? And is there any opportunity to find funding to alleviate that issue?
Mr. Small, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, widening the footpath on the south side of Station Road is a difficult problem because the footpath at the moment is very narrow, too narrow really for proper use by wheelchair users. It's bounded by a soundproofing fence, which was installed by Jones Homes, and according to the plans at the time, has been wrongly installed. It's on the public footpath side of a hedge, whereas in the plans it should have been installed on the housing side of that hedge. The hedge is built right at the top of quite a steep drop down into the grounds of the last house in the terrace known as the Carriages. So to widen the footpath is a somewhat difficult engineering problem, but it could be done by the use of a relatively narrow strip of land currently forming part of the garden of the last house in the Carriages development.
Thank you. Can I add a little bit on that? So what effect would the single carriageway have on the traffic? I'm sorry about this. What effect would the changes to traffic patterns have? It's not clear to me where the traffic would go now if it was a single carriageway.
The traffic flows on the B 5358 are quite heavy, as I think Councillor Burkill has pointed out. And the junction between the B5358 and Wilmslow Road, which is controlled by a complex system of lights, has, I think, already been designated by Cheshire East Highways Department as a junction which is reaching saturation point at peak travel times. That's only a few yards down the road from the bridge over the railway.
Thank you, Councillor Smithers. And Councillor McFarlane, please.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Small. This may be a question to Mr. Crowther, really, but this is an outline application. I'm just wondering what your thoughts would be regarding facilities for taxis. Do many? I know Handforth Station, but do you know if a taxi facility would be of any use to passengers, or even a drop-off or pick-up facility for visitors coming in without leaving cars and perhaps walking up along the pathway to the station, bearing in mind the Garden Village is going to have a lot of houses. Do you think that is something that should be considered in the future?
The station itself used to have a drop-off facility, though I believe there were some problems with the amount of weight that could be carried by the railway bridge, and that drop-off lay-by right outside the ticket office was finally blocked off. So there is no real facility for taxis to stop immediately outside the station buildings at present. Of course, the plans for this new car park include the bus service. As we've heard earlier on, bus services through Handforth are literally pathetic at the moment, and a bus route is planned directly from the Garden Village into this proposed new car park. There would be plenty of taxis.
May I ask?
Pick up from the car park.
Thank you. I'm just comparing it to Wilmslow Station, which I know well, and a lot of drivers, they don't park, they drop people off and pick people up.
Can I encourage you to ask a question, please?
Oh, sorry. Mr. Small, on the point of a drop-off and pick-up facility, would that be of any use to be considered, do you feel, for drivers just picking up passengers, dropping passengers off? Thank you.
It would be a nice idea to have, in addition to the bus turning circle and the bus stop, it would be nice to have a taxi rank inserted into the plans, but within the proposed car park area.
Thank you, Mr. Small. I don't see any further members indicating to ask a question, so would I now ask you to turn off your camera and microphone, but do feel free to remain in the meeting. So can I now call a final speaker on this item, Mr. Bowden, who is representing the applicant, to address the committee. And Mr. Bowden, you also have 3 minutes, and there may be questions afterwards. Please begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair. I haven't prepared a presentation. I'll explain who I am. I work for a consultancy who have supported Engine of the North and the applicant on the design and planning of the layout of the scheme and the design and assessment of the off-site works. And we've also carried out parking studies in the town to establish what the level of demand that exists in the town and the shortfall that we think exists there. I don't have anything else to add in terms of the support of the scheme. It's a constrained site, and we've done whatever we can to provide a safe and safe access into the site, and with required capacity for cars and buses and good connections for pedestrians between the car park and the railway station. There is more traffic. Undoubtedly, the scheme will introduce more traffic to Station Road. It's an empty site at the moment, and we're creating a car park. What the scheme aims to do in the wider context is to reduce traffic on the roads. So by encouraging people to use the station and encouraging people to drive to the station rather than drive to their destination, drive all the way to their destination, the overall aim is that there is less traffic on the roads, but of course there is a local impact near to the site. In terms of the single carriageway proposal at the station, it's probably worth explaining. It's a shuttle system, so it's not a one-way system. Vehicles take it in turns to shuttle through a single width section of road.
and there will be a queue there that introduces a new delay that doesn't exist at the moment, but it's a relatively small delay, and the signals would be connected to the Wilmslow Road signals, so hopefully the efficiency of that whole system could be optimised to reduce the amount of traffic. But there is undoubtedly more traffic in the area. I think that's all I need to say, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowden. Are there any questions, members, please, to Mr. Bowden? Councillor Findlow, please. Yes.
Can you just confirm, Chairman, that Mr. Bowden is representing the applicant, because the applicant, Engine of the North, is an emanation of the council?
Yes, that's correct, Councillor Findlow. Mr. Bowden is representing the applicant.
Right, so we don't have anyone from the council being Engine of the North. Thank you.
Correct. Any further questions, members? No, I'm not seeing anybody indicating. So in that case, Mr. Bowden, if I could ask you to now turn off your camera and microphone again, but do feel free to remain in the meeting. So at this point, I will go back to our officers, starting with Mr. Wakefield, just to ask if there are any points that were raised during the public speaking that you would like to comment on before I go back to questions from members. Mr. Wakefield, please. Oh, sorry, Mr. Crowther. Sorry, getting myself confused.
No problem, Chair. I think, to be fair, Chair, I think most of the questions are highways related. So I think my able colleague, Mr. Hurdis, is best able to answer most of the questions. Just picking a couple of points of Councillor Burkill's comments. In terms of, he touched on the issue of funding for the scheme. Now, clearly there is a funding package for any proposal, but that's not, I'm afraid, a relevant planning consideration for looking at this scheme. Where the funding comes from and when that happens is not a relevant determination factor here. We're looking at the principle of this use on this site, and we determine it on its own merits. I understand there is funding in the background for this, and obviously some of it is based on the Garden Village happening in due course. But that is not a determination factor for this application. But I think Mr. Hurdis can answer, I think, most of the questions in relation to the highways matters. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Crowther. Mr. Hurdis, would you like to come in at this point?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Crowther. Just going through some of the points that are raised by the speakers in relation to the application, just touching on Councillor Burkill's comments. The first point I'd like to make, he did talk about visibility displays and the need to increase the visibility displays from the proposed access into the new park and ride facility. He mentioned 70 metres, which in old money was the previous visibility required for a 30-mile-an-hour road. That has actually been reduced as part of Manifest Streets back in 2012 to 43 metres. So that was the first point to make. The requirement for visibility display, which is the amount you can see up and down a road when you actually leave a side road, is determined through the speed of traffic, not the volume of traffic. I think Councillor Burkill referred to an increase of volume of traffic as a result of potentially the A55 extension there, which opened in October 2018. So the actual increase in volume of traffic wouldn't actually require an increase in visibility. It's the speed of traffic that would potentially require an increase in visibility. So I just wanted to make that point. And the applicant has put forward a visibility display of 43 metres based on the posted speed of the road. So we're quite happy with the 43 metres, just to make that point. In relation to sort of general traffic surveys that have been undertaken by the applicant, they are undertaken in 2019. So that was after the SEMS or the A555 extension opened there up into Manchester Airport. So they did reflect the new traffic flows and distribution on the network as a result of the A555 extension. So we were quite happy with those flows that were taken at that time. Obviously, at the moment, flows are very, very different around the network because of COVID-19. But back in 2019, they were relatively stable. So quite happy with the surveys that have been done. Those traffic surveys were then used to inform the impact of the proposal. So in terms of the highway impact, in terms of capacity at two junctions really, two junctions and one additional measure. So the two junctions were the access and egress coming out of the new proposed park and ride turning facility and the car park, and also the existing signal junction there on the Wilmslow Road Station Road intersection that also intersect with Bulkley Road as well. So those traffic figures were used to inform the impact of the development at those two junctions. So they are obviously very crucial to the scheme, and there is an impact. There's no getting away from that. The capacity at the new egress and access onto Station Road, we were quite happy with the way that operated in terms of getting in and out at that point. The more interesting aspect, of course, is that the existing signals at Wilmslow Road, most members potentially will know that junction. I know it myself well. There have been some slight alterations to that junction as part of the SEMS mitigation works. But putting that to one side, there is an impact there. And just looking at the figures again, briefly, and we can go into a bit more in the debate, so I won't go on too much here, but just looking at the AM peak, there is an increase. So you're looking at potentially on Station Road approaching the signals, an increase of 2 vehicles queuing at that junction in the AM as a result of the scheme. So 2 additional vehicles. And in the PM, we're looking at about 4 additional vehicles queuing at Station Road when they approach that signal junction. So there is an increase, but in my experience, that is an acceptable increase given what we're trying to achieve in terms of providing a park and ride facility to potentially serve the Garden Village, which is obviously a separate application not under consideration today. But the whole idea, I believe the applicant has said, that the idea of the park and ride facility is to give more transport choices to a future Garden Village as the main purpose of the scheme. Then just moving briefly onto the shuttle working, as I think the representation, the applicant made the point, it's not a one-way. It operates in a one-way form, but it's what's called a single alternate line traffic controlled by signals. Again, that has been modelled in terms of the impact of delay. You inevitably get a delay when you put stop lines in a road. That's true. And there is a slight negative of that. But I think as the applicant's consultant made the point that you can, in essence, get those 2 signal operations to talk to each other and smooth the flow. And you can do that with different signal techniques. So on balance, we're happy with the signal alterations in terms of the shuttle working because of the benefits it provides in terms of creating wider footways. And we may talk about the benefits of that and the disbenefits of that and not actually having the signal operation. Would it still be acceptable is a potential question that could come back in the debate. But so just on Councillor Burkle's points, the visibility displays we're happy with from the access, and the traffic surveys that have been undertaken, we're happy with them, and the resulting modelling that's been undertaken, we are happy with the modelling that's been undertaken and the impact of the development. On balance, we're happy with that from a highways perspective. And then moving on to, I think it was a member of the Friends for Handford Station made the point again about the shuttle working, and hopefully I've just covered that in my previous response to Councillor Burkle. We are happy with the shuttle working. It does work within the tolerance of acceptability from a highways perspective. There is some delay, but we do feel the benefits of the improved footways, and that makes it sort of a nicer scheme, more encouragement to walking around the site and more active travel access to the site, which is important in our view. So we do believe that is acceptable from a highways perspective. So hopefully that's a quick response there, Chair, on those points raised by the speakers.
Thank you again, Mr. Hurdis, for that. Very comprehensive. I can see that Councillor Dean would like to ask a question. I have a couple of questions also. If any other members like to ask a question, please indicate. In the meantime, I'll go to Councillor Dean, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a question for Mr. Crowther. It's probably my fault. I'm a little bit confused. This is on the agenda as an outline application. So am I right to assume that the details of said shuttle scheme, single laning the bridge, widening of the pavement, etc., are actually not part of this application, but will be part of a later reserved matters application? Or are we deciding on what to do with the bridge here and now? Because I thought it wasn't yet decided.
Thanks, Councillor Dean. Any further questions, members, please? not seeing anybody at the moment. As I said, I have a couple of questions. One of them certainly for Mr. Hurdus. It might be that they're both for Mr. Hurdus, I'm not sure. Firstly, I'm very familiar with this area, but other members may not be. Could you just clarify the distance between the proposed traffic management on Station Road and the existing traffic management at the junction with Station Road and Wilmslow Road? And also what traffic modelling has taken place to provide comfort that there won't be a backing up of traffic between the proposed signals and the existing. And secondly, as Mr. Crowther explained, the plans before us are outline only, and although it's very welcome to see provision made for cycle parking within the plans, clearly because they're only outlined, there's nothing committing the applicant to that. So would it be appropriate, if members were minded to approve this, for us to add a condition making sure that we're able to ensure that cycle parking remains in the full application when it comes forwards? I don't see any other members seeking to ask a question, so we'll go back to Mr. Hurdus first of all, and then Mr. Crowther.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I can try and answer certainly the first two questions that you've raised there. The first question in terms of the distance between the stop line of the shuttle working, the westerlymost stop line, and the existing signal control at Wilmslow Road, Station Road, is approximately 125 metres. So that's the distance between those two operations. In relation to the modelling that's taken place to model the impact of the shuttle working, they've used a LINSIG package, which is a industry standard national modelling tool that obviously works on inputs of traffic flow and timings of signals, and then produces information in relation to what's called mean max Q and the degrees of saturation. So i.e. how much delay would be caused by the imposition of the signals. So yes, modelling techniques have been used, and I've audited those modelling techniques that have been submitted by the applicant, and as I did intimate in my previous response, there is some slight worsening of delay at the Wilmslow Road Station Road junction, which we can talk about in more detail during the debate, but I do think it's, given the benefits of the scheme, I do think it's within the tolerance of acceptance from a highway's perspective. In relation to the cycle parking, all I can say on that is currently on the plans, there is quite a lot of cycle parking actually delineated on the plans, which is adjacent to the new bus stop within the park and ride turning facility. I think there's quite a few spaces there that are marked on the plan as submitted. But in relation to whether it would be confirmed as part of reserve matters, hopefully Mr. Crowther might be able to provide some clarity on that.
Thank you, Mr. Hurdus. Before I go to Mr. Crowther, I can see that Councillor Puddicombe and Councillor Smetham would like to ask questions also. So I'll just go to take those two questions first and then go back to Mr. Crowther. So Councillor Puddicombe, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor Burkill asked if this could be deferred until it can be a full application. Could Mr. Crowther explain why we're looking at it as an outline application now, and why it couldn't be held back until we can see the full application? And also, Councillor Findlow sought to clarify who Mr. Bowden was working for, the applicant being Engine of the North. And my understanding is Engine of the North were brought back in-house in August 19, I think it was. So is this one of the residual applications for Engine of the North that are just being worked through, please? Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Smetham, please.
Thanks very much. Thanks as well to Highways for Paul Hurdus for the clarification of the shuttle scheme, and that was very clear. It wasn't obvious to me at the beginning. That's great. The suggestion that a condition is added for the cyclists was a good idea, and triggered me into thinking that perhaps there should be a condition for the wheelchair users, who are even more in need, I would suggest, of having a close access, easy access for them as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smetham. Mr. Crowther, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and deal with these one by one. First of all, in relation to Councillor Dean's question about what was being applied for, it is an outline scheme, but I think the report makes it clear that means of access forms part of this scheme. So in other words, we're looking today at not just the access into the site, but all the associated roadworks, if you like, that are associated with that Mr. Hurdas has already referred to. So the signalling, sort of the singling of the carriageway over the railway bridge is part of this scheme, and should members support that aspect of it, that would be approved. And you'll see there's one of the conditions that references the installation of that as part of the proposal. So yes, that is part of the scheme that we're looking at today. Just moving, I suppose, swiftly on to Councillor Puddicombe's question about the full application. This application is, should we say, it's a detailed outline in terms of the fact that we've got a properly drawn up scale drawing that indicates exactly how this site could be laid out. But the reality is, at this stage, the designers have not sort of finalised the details. So there are lots of things we'd need to sort of iron out. You've seen there's comments, for example, in the report from the police force in terms of designing this for with CCTV, in accordance with their kind of aspirations in terms of designing out Crown and the like. So there is more detail to be gone in. I mean, the reality is the scheme would look similar to what we have before us today, but the detail needs to be worked out, and they haven't gone down to that fine grain, if you like, of working all that through. And again, things like the bus stop, and if we look at just sort of moving, if we looked at, for example, taxi drop-offs, or as Councillor Smetham has referred to, some sort of sort of disabled access features, these all need to be worked into the scheme and designed in a bit more detail. So I think from members' point of view, we've got a pretty detailed scheme, but it does need to go to an extra level of detail, and that's why we're looking at, if this were acceptable to members, this is an outline scheme still, and we'd have to go to a reserved matter stage to deal with that particular level. Moving on to cycle parking, again, we're quite happy to ensure there's a condition applied to any permission that requires that cycle provision is provided in accordance with the schemes we submitted, and obviously that will be submitted at the reserved matters stage. In terms of Engine of the North, yes, you're quite correct. They are now part of our economic development team, as I understand it. This is an application, sort of a legacy application, if you like. It was submitted at the time they were still Engine of the North. But again, it's still a relevant planning application submitted by Cheshire East Council in whatever guise that we're here to determine today, members. I think, Chair, that was all the points I've got written down here. Forgive me if I've missed one, but I think that's all the points covered.
I think it was also. So thank you, Mr. Crowther. And perhaps we could now move to debate this item. Can I have a volunteer to lead us in debate, please? I'm sensing a reluctance today to start the ball rolling on this. Councillor Findlow, please.
The parish council and the local member strongly objected to the singling of the carriageway over Station Road. Have I got it right? We're approving that as an infrastructure matter today if we approve this application.
That was understanding, Councillor Findlow, yes.
Yes. Well, I think that's a matter of concern, given the strong objection to the singling. I say no more than that at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Findlow. Councillor Smetham, please.
Yes, thank you. We referred at the beginning of the meeting to an email that some of us received and others didn't. Can we be assured that there is no whip being applied to this planning application?
Well, certainly as independent group leader, I can assure you independent members are never whipped. So that wouldn't be a relevant thing, but thank you for asking the question. Councillor Nicholas.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's just a response to that, really. Absolutely. We don't whip independents, so can't do that. So that didn't happen. But I just think it should be pointed out that I think the email was sent. It's been referenced that this is from the portfolio holder. I think it should be stressed that this was a communication, an email from a ward councillor who's been liaising and representing local residents as a neighbouring ward councillor. So it was definitely not on the position of being the portfolio holder. So I just think that should be made clear. But there was definitely no whipping going on. Well, as a whip, that is.
Thank you for that clarity, Councillor.
Possibly, Chairman, if I could ask, could that email be shared with us?
I don't know. To be honest, I haven't really read it, so but I don't think it should be. No, it's a private email. So
Assuming it's relevant to the application, of course.
I personally couldn't comment because as I said earlier, I haven't checked my emails since late yesterday evening, so I don't know whether I've been sent it. If it's a personal email, I wouldn't have thought it was appropriate to share it, but as I say again, thank you for raising it. I think Councillor McFarlane may wish to address this also. Councillor McFarlane.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Smetham, I can say that it was just a list of thoughts by the ward councillor and things that I was going over my head anyway. My question about drop-off, pick-up and taxis was one which Councillor Fox mentioned, and I was going to mention that in any case. So there was nothing untoward. It was her purely in her role as ward councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Holland and then Councillor Findlay, please.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I just think we need some clarity here. I mean, I have no idea where the email has come from. It was suggested it came from the portfolio holder, but that may have been the portfolio holder just passing it on. I think we need two things. We need to know who's received it and who hasn't received it. And from my estimations, there's two people that are members that haven't declared whether they've received it or not. And I just think we need clarity, really, because it wouldn't be quite fair if some people had something that we should have had. We don't know whether we should have had it or we shouldn't have had it, and they've you know, got some more information than others may not have, and I think it's only right and proper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Holland. I will just invite our Democratic Services Officer, Sarah Baxter, to comment on this before I have my own remark.
Yes, through you, Chair, it's relevant. It's third-party correspondence. Some members of committees will get emails not circulated to everybody in the committee. It's entirely for the individual to, if they've read that email, to declare it at the meeting, and that's what's been done today. So anybody that had that email and has read it, they should then have declared it, which I believe that's what happened. And if some members on the committee haven't had that email, that is not relevant to proceedings today. Perhaps if legal want to confirm that as well, and then, you know, well, that would help.
Would our legal officer like to add anything at this point before I move on?
No, Mr. Chairman, I agree with what Sarah said.
Thank you very much. And for my own part, I mean, I always, at the start of planning committee meetings where I have been aware that I've received emails in relation to items on an agenda, usually I have to say from applicants or agents, occasionally from residents, I always say the same thing: I don't read them because we're required to make decisions based upon the information contained within the report on the day, the information that public speakers give us, and then by listening to and contributing to the debate. So Councillor Findlay, please, and then Councillor Mannion. Councillor Findlay?
Sorry, there we are, we're in. I do agree with the concerns raised by Councillor Smetham and Holland, but that's not what I want to say. I obviously accept there's a great need for this car parking and want it to happen. I'm sure we all do. but this is only an outline application. Could someone explain the reasoning behind why this is not a full application, so you can see all the ramifications? In other words, I'm putting the point, it seems somewhat premature, desirable as the outcome is, which I'm sure we all want for a proper car park for Handforth Station.
I'll come back to Mr. Crowther shortly. Thank you for that, Councillor Findlay. I'll just take a contribution from Councillor Mannion before I do that.
It's a very quick one, Chair. I just want it to be on the record that I have not received any correspondence whatsoever from anybody other than the electronic version of today's agenda relating to this item. So I just want to put that on the record.
Thank you very much.
I managed to check my email box.
Can I come back to Mr. Crowther and just ask him to address the point that Councillor Findlay raised, please?
Of course, Chair. Councillor Findlay, I can only reiterate what I've already said in response last time. This is an outline application, but it's supported by a considerable amount of information, particularly, I emphasise, on the highways side, which clearly is of the most concern, I think, from the debate we've had to date. I'm quite confident that we have enough detail here to determine this application. We have an illustrative layout which we are not approving, but gives a pretty good indication of the type and form of this car park would take, the numbers of spaces that will be contained in there, and all the key elements for that, so the bus drop-off area, cycle parking, etc., that would all be in that area. Now, as I said before, there will have to be in due course another level of detail that they will need to go into at the reserved matters stage, but that really just deals with, as I said, issues of security, issues of boundary treatment, the type of tree planting, etc., that would all be in that particular scheme. So I'm quite confident you've got enough information, members, here to determine this application as an outline application, but with the confidence that there's a lot of supporting information here, proper tree surveys, all the highways information, etc., that would be in support of this. So I'm quite confident here we have enough information for that. Thank you, Chair.
I still prefer an holistic approach to something so difficult as this, Chairman, sorry to say, and I'm still really concerned about the singling issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crowther. Also, thank you, Councillor Findlay. Councillor Mannion, please.
Would the full application come back to this committee for determination if we were minded to grant outline permission? Would the full application have to come back to Northern Planning?
Well, we can
I think it should, but I'd like some reassurance on that.
Well, Councillor Mannion, we can certainly request that. I know that we have done with previous outline applications that have been before the committee, and we can request that when we arrive at a resolution at the end of the debate. Councillor Smetham, I'm not sure whether I've been to you already or whether it's a new point that you wish to make.
Councillor Mannion's just asked my question, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any contributions to the debate then? I mean, my own thoughts on this really are that I'm very much in favour of what's being proposed. I think it's the kind of application that we should be encouraging. It's encouraging multimodal access to Handforth and Handforth Station. We've got bus links, public transport, train links, facilities for private car, cycling access and cycle parking. As I said earlier, I do think it's important that we add cycling as a condition to make sure that we retain it, because the plans before us are only indicative at this stage, and also taking into account the point that Councillor Smetham raised earlier about disability access. I believe it's probably implicit within the plans for footway widening, but it might be appropriate to make sure that we retain that by condition also. But otherwise, I'm currently of the view that this is something that's very much to be welcomed. Councillor Harewood, please.
Thank you, Chair. Notwithstanding the concerns, I'm very much in favour of this improvement with the conditions of disability and widening. I know a little bit of that, and it seems that that is a problem at Handforth and has been such a long time. This seems to be, at this point, a great improvement to what is there. And if we can come to an arrangement of putting in those other conditions of disability and footpath, I can't, and upholding the concerns, I am in favour of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. Who would like to go next? Councillor Mannion, please.
It's becoming a bit of a pattern at today's meeting, therefore I'd like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation. We may need to look again at some of the conditions, and I'd like some input on that. I'm happy to incorporate them. And could we also add a commentary that we would urge, we'd urge that this matter come back to Northern Planning for determination if and when a full application is submitted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mannion. Yes, I would certainly support that last point as well. Councillor Findlow and then Councillor Harewood again, please.
Well, I also endorse that as well. Do we have to commit ourselves at this stage to the singling? Because that seems to be the issue, doesn't it?
My understanding, Councillor Findlow, and I will seek clarity before we obviously go to any vote, but my understanding is that we are looking to, if this is approved, approve the highways proposals, but that the plans for the details of the site itself and the layout of the parking areas and the bus stops and the cycle spaces would come back as part of a reserved matters application. But
so could the singling be removed now or not, please?
I'll seek clarity on that. Councillor Hare, please.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered if it was already approved, because I feel it. I could second this, because if it's coming back and all these conditions have been made, I very much would like to second it, if that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harewood. I will take that as seconding the proposal for approval, but I'll now just go back to the Planning Officer, Mr. Crowther, for clarity on the question that Councillor Findlow raised, and also in relation to potential conditions being added, securing cycle parking and disability access. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. In simple terms, obviously the singling of the carriageway over the station bridge is a part of this scheme, and clearly you've heard my colleague Mr. Hurdis explaining why we think it's a much needed improvement that obviously gives us much better pedestrian access to the station, because obviously the footways are very narrow at that point, and clearly something that we are supporting. However, members, if you are not happy with that aspect of the scheme, it is obviously within your gift as planning committee to not approve that element, to do so, and that can be minuted obviously today, so that we would not be approving that element of the scheme. We can put a condition on that makes that absolutely clear, and we would obviously not have the condition that requires the detail as set out, I think it's forgive me, members, while I quickly get to the relevant condition. I think at the moment there's a condition at number 11 that says prior to commencement of the operation, the signals would be implemented, and clearly that condition would no longer be necessary. So just to make that clear, if that is members' wish, then that can be done. In other words, it can be approved without the singling, if that is what members think is the right. That's clearly not what we're recommending, but that's within your gift as planning committee. In terms of the other matters, I think I've already covered the issue of trees, so I highlighted that in my introduction. So there's an element of method statements and supervision that needs to be added to condition number 8. and clearly members have expressed a desire to see an additional condition today that would cover for both cycle parking and provision for disabled access. So those two could be added to any conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before you go, Mr. Crowther, so I have a supplementary, which it may actually be for Mr. Hurdus, but from what you've just explained in relation to the road, the carriageway singling, is the singling of Station Road viable in the absence of signalling? In other words, by approving singling, are we implicitly approving signalling as well?
I think my understanding is you can't have one way out the other, but I'll defer to my colleague for that, who has better knowledge of that, I'm afraid. Thank you. Mr. Hurdus, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to come in on that point, the answer is it would have to be signalled, because the forward visibility over the bridge, you just wouldn't be able to get. Sometimes you can have signalling, which is single line working without signalisation, because you have a give and take operation where you can see the opposing car and you just give way, but you'd have an issue with forward visibility because of the alignment of the road. Obviously it goes over the rail line, the electric cables as well, so it would be signalled as part of the scheme which has been put forward. Just to say, as part of this scheme which has been put forward by the applicant to provide these additional footways, they did require the signalisation and introduction of the shuttle working. So just to clarify that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hurdus. I think that's helpful, because it's important to understand that, well, the implication effectively is that we would be approving signalling as well. Councillor Dean, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I personally think that the singling and signalling proposal looks as though it's very necessary, but I just wanted to make the point that if we do give it planning permission today, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen, because it appears to be a political hot potato, judging by the words of the local councillor, Councillor Burkill, who said he understood it was no longer happening. So the fact that we give it planning permission today doesn't mean that a further planning application can come in future for a completely different scheme, which Councillor Burkill and his colleagues have managed to negotiate with Highways. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Smithern, please.
Sorry to labour this singling point, but if it's a singling method, did you say that involves traffic lights as well? I'm sorry to do this.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I can see Mr. Hurdus would like to come back, presumably on this point, so I'll invite him to do that now.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a very quick point there, just following from Councillor Dean's comment there in relation to the other scheme which is being promoted by Cheshire East Council. I think Councillor Burkill mentioned this as well in